There is a war inside you, not the loud kind, not the kind with explosions or marching flags or enemies you can point at. This one is quieter, more intimate, more ruthless. It happens in the moments no one sees. When you stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m., when your smile trembles at the edges, when you nod, "I'm fine," because explaining the truth feels like bleeding in public. The world applauds victories it can measure, promotions, milestones, gold stars, but the most brutal battles you fight are the ones without witnesses. The ones fought in the dark. The ones where the enemy is wearing your face. Every day, you negotiate with old wounds, outdated versions of yourself, fears you've inherited, and expectations you never agreed to carry. Every day, you armor up just to move through a world that rarely asks who you are under the armor. This book is not about the noise outside you. It's about the storm within. It's about the critic that never sleeps, the child who still cries inside your chest, the ego that lies beautifully, the truth that whispers quietly. It's about the war between comfort and growth, peace and chaos, masks and authenticity. This is not a book of easy fixes. It's not a sermon. It's not a lecture. It's an invitation to stop pretending you are unscarred, to explore the terrain of your own psychology with courage and curiosity, and to finally see the battles you've been fighting alone. Because once you see the war clearly, you can stop losing by accident. You can learn to choose your strategies, your weapons, your allies. You can learn to fight smarter, or sometimes not fight at all. You can reclaim the parts of you that got lost during the chaos. The quiet war has always been there. Now it's time to understand it. And maybe, for the first time, win. Introduction: The Invisible Battles Within. The nature of inner conflict. Every day, we walk through life carrying the weight of an unseen war. It's a struggle that often goes unnoticed, even by ourselves. Within each of us lies an internal battleground where voices clash. The inner critic, the inner child, the demands of adult life, and the yearning for growth. These voices shape our thoughts and actions, creating an inner dialogue that can feel overwhelming and chaotic. You may find yourself agreeing to meet friends out of obligation, even when you'd prefer to stay at home, nurturing your own spirit. This conflict isn't just a passing nuisance. It forms the backbone of our identity. The battles we fight within ourselves bubble to the surface in moments of stress, decision-making, or self-reflection. The nature of these conflicts is complex. Sometimes, it may manifest as a sharp, critical voice berating you for not being successful enough at work or for not meeting the expectations set by family or society. Other times, it's the timid whisper of the inner child, reminding you of a time when your biggest worry was whether to ask for a second helping of dessert. When these voices interact, they create a tension that can lead to emotional addiction, behaviors that temporarily distract us from the conflict but never resolve it. The constant ebb and flow of these emotions can feel like a silent war, where the stakes are your well-being and your authenticity. To comprehend this inner conflict, we need to peel back the layers and understand its roots. Trauma plays a significant role. It can come from experiences in childhood, relationships, or societal pressures that leave lasting imprints on our sense of self. This trauma often gives rise to a skyscraper of ego, defensive structures built to protect our vulnerable selves. While the ego is meant to shield us from pain, it can also trap us in a cycle of fear. Fear of success often hovers just beneath the surface, where the prospect of stepping into a brighter future becomes overshadowed by worries of inadequacy and self-doubt. Fear of peace is just as insidious, creating a perhaps surprising sense of discomfort in finding calm or happiness. You might find yourself self-sabotaging good things in your life, shying away from joy because deep down, it feels unearned or unfamiliar. This struggle is silent but palpable. It keeps many stuck in patterns that feel habitual yet unfulfilling. The question becomes, how do we begin to heal these wounds and challenge the narratives we tell ourselves? The path to resolution involves embracing the discomfort, acknowledging our fears, and allowing ourselves to feel the emotions we've long avoided. The art of choosing yourself must also enter the conversation. It requires recognizing that the inner war does not have to define your destiny. Instead of allowing fear and trauma to dictate who you are, you can start making choices that align with your authentic self. This process can feel violent. It challenges everything you've come to believe about yourself. Healing requires the courage to confront your inner critic and engage with the wounded child you carry within. By choosing to acknowledge these parts of yourself, rather than hiding them away, transformation begins to take root. As you navigate the complexities of your inner conflict, remember this: the fight may be quiet, but it is essential. It shapes not only your identity, but also your future. Take a moment to breathe and listen to the voices inside you. Write them down, engage in dialogue with them, or simply sit in silence with them. In these moments, real understanding and healing can begin. Why these battles go unseen? Inside each of us, a silent war unfolds, a battle not fought with weapons or words but with thoughts, feelings, and the shadows of past wounds. These internal conflicts shape the way we see the world, the choices we make, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Yet, they often go unnoticed, buried beneath the noise of daily routines and the pressure to keep up appearances. The clash between your inner critic and your desire for growth. The tug of the wounded child yearning for safety against the adult craving freedom. These struggles shift the soil beneath your feet without making a sound. We walk through life navigating this hidden terrain, unaware of the forces that pull us in different directions. Our emotions swing like pendulums between fear and hope, comfort and discomfort, but much of this emotional turbulence remains invisible to others and sometimes even to ourselves. This is why the war inside feels like a ghost, present but intangible, shaping your identity without clear signs. When facing these battles, we often settle for survival rather than truth, using distractions and justifications to avoid the messy confrontation with what lies beneath. In those quiet moments when your mind is empty or your heart restless, this battlefield makes itself known. It becomes the voice that judges your worth, the hesitation before a big leap, the numbness when love feels too risky. These unseen conflicts aren't dramatic outbursts, but intricate patterns of inner resistance, loops of trauma, emotional addiction, and fear weaving themselves into daily life. They whisper stories about failure before you've even tried, telling you to stay small, to hide, or to lose hope and change. The battles inside remain invisible largely because we are afraid to look directly at them. Fear acts like a veil, preventing us from acknowledging the pain and contradictions within. It is easier to pretend everything is fine than to face the chaos and vulnerability that true self-awareness invites. Shame deepens this invisibility. It tells us that our struggles are weakness, that something is fundamentally wrong with us, so we lock our wounds away in secrecy. This shame isolates us, convincing us that no one else fights the same battles, so they must be hidden at all costs. We also get caught up in illusions, stories we accept as truths that blur the line between who we are and who we pretend to be. The ego, with all its defenses, masks inner wounds through pride, anger, or control, creating a facade that conceals the real conflict beneath. This makes the internal war harder to spot because it feels more like a performance than a struggle. Many of us confuse comfort with peace, mistaking numbness or avoidance for well-being. This subtle trickery keeps the battles locked away, disguised as normalcy, until they burst out in ways that leave us bewildered. You might not see these fights clearly because they are wrapped in everyday moments, hesitations, second guesses, invisible boundaries we impose on ourselves. When you don't recognize the combat beneath, you treat the surface symptoms as obstacles rather than signals. You might respond to anxiety, self-doubt, or dissatisfaction with frustration or denial, never knowing these are the fingerprints of a deeper, unseen conflict. These hidden wars shape your identity quietly but relentlessly, influencing how you show up in every relationship, decision, and experience. The first step to noticing these unseen battles is to begin watching your inner world with gentle curiosity, without the pressure to fix or judge. Observe where the tension lives, not just in your mind, but in your body, in your reactions. When you learn to sit with the discomfort of internal conflict, you create space for truth and growth. This act of noticing is itself a form of courage and self-respect, a small but powerful way of choosing yourself over the illusions, fears, and shame that keep these battles hidden. The power of acknowledging the war. Most of us go through life unaware of the invisible battle raging inside. It's a quiet war between parts of ourselves we often prefer to ignore. The critic whispering doubt, the inner child holding wounds, the ego seeking comfort at all costs. These conflicts aren't loud or obvious, so they slip beneath our radar. We carry them like unspoken scars, shaping our choices, our moods, and our sense of self without us even realizing it. Acknowledging this unseen war means opening your eyes to the subtle ways your inner dialogues and unresolved struggles influence your actions and reactions every day. This internal conflict isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of life. It's the tug-of-war that keeps you in a state of quiet chaos, often disguised as normalcy or complacency. When you ignore it, these battles accumulate, trauma loops that trap you in familiar patterns, fears that keep you from change, stories you tell yourself about who you are. Recognizing this silent fight requires honesty, facing discomfort, fears, and vulnerabilities you've tried to hide. Only when you see it can you begin to understand how deeply it shapes your story, your identity, and your destiny. Seeing your internal war for what it is doesn't mean you have to fix everything overnight. It starts with simple acknowledgement, naming the parts of you that are fighting, resisting, or hiding. When you stop denying the cracks in your armor, you create space for truth to enter. This act of acknowledgement acts like a mirror, backing you into the uncomfortable truth that you are more than your masks or defenses. It's a necessary step toward healing because you can't change what you refuse to see. When you acknowledge the war within, you shift from being a prisoner of your stories to an observer with power to choose differently. This recognition clears the fog. It reveals the battleground and your role within it. No longer do you see yourself as a victim of circumstance or solely driven by unconscious patterns. Instead, you become aware that your internal conflicts are the raw material of your growth. This awareness allows you to detoxify old wounds, challenge limiting beliefs, and confront fears that keep you stuck. It's not easy. Acknowledging the war often feels like stepping into chaos, but it's the first step toward authentic transformation. Once recognized, these conflicts lose some of their power. No longer invisible enemies, they become parts of yourself that can be understood, negotiated with, and ultimately integrated. Chapter 1. The Inner Critic and the Voice of Self-Doubt. Understanding the inner critic. The inner critic is that relentless voice inside your head that seems to know just what to say to evoke self-doubt. It whispers harsh judgments about your choices, your body, and your worth. Often, we dismiss this inner chatter as simply part of who we are, but it operates beneath the surface of our awareness, shaping our identity and decisions in profound ways. This voice can sound like a disapproving parent, a disgruntled teacher, or even a jealous peer from your past, echoing unkind words that induce guilt and insecurity. Over time, it becomes an integral part of our thought patterns, silently steering our lives toward negativity and self-sabotage. Understanding how this critic operates is essential for reclaiming your narrative. It thrives on comparison, constantly reminding you of what you lack when placed alongside others. The inner critic doesn't celebrate your victories. Instead, it diminishes them, saying they aren't good enough. It creates a cycle of doubt and fear, conditioning you to stay in your comfort zone where you feel safe, but simultaneously unfulfilled. The critical voice is trapped in a continuous loop, convincing you that you are unworthy of success, peace, or genuine happiness. Awareness of this voice is the first step to breaking the chains it wraps around you. The roots of self-criticism often trace back to childhood experiences. Many of us grew up in environments that prioritized achievement and perfectionism, where worth was tied to performance. Messages like, "You have to do better," or "Why can't you be more like your sibling?" become insidious beliefs that mold our inner dialogue. Trauma, whether overt or subtle, also plays a crucial role, carving deeper grooves in our psyche where self-loathing can thrive. Each instance of bullying, rejection, or failure buries a seed of doubt that grows into a towering wall of self-criticism. Yet, the inner critic can serve as both an adversary and a guide. It often attempts to protect us from the pain of failure, urging caution in a world that feels unforgiving. However, this focus on protection hinders growth, leaving no room for exploration or risk. Acknowledging the inner critic as a part of you, rather than a villain, can create a softer approach to self-reflection. This understanding allows you to engage with it compassionately, recognizing that it stems from a desire to keep you safe, but has misplaced its trust in a fragile narrative. Consider this. When the inner critic pipes up, take a moment to pause and listen without engaging in dialogue. Ask yourself where its messages come from and what fears underpin its words. This practice can shift your perspective, enabling you to view the critic not as an enemy, but as a misguided protector. By examining the roots of your self-criticism, you can begin to cultivate a more compassionate relationship with yourself, one that acknowledges the hurt of the past while fostering growth and resilience in the present. To silence the inner critic, start small. Identify one negative thought it often instills and counter it with one piece of evidence that contradicts its message. This simple exercise can incrementally build a more supportive internal environment. With mindful awareness, the power of your inner voice can shift from a place of criticism to one that encourages growth and peace. How self-doubt shapes our reality. Self-doubt is like a quiet voice that slips in when we least expect it, twisting the truth until it feels like a distortion of who we are. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Instead, it settles into the crevices of our mind, planting seeds of uncertainty that grow into entire landscapes of hesitation and fear. When self-doubt whispers that we are not enough, not worthy, or not capable, it colors every thought and decision, shaping how we see the world and ourselves. This distortion creeps into our perception of reality, bending facts and possibilities until our own reflection becomes a stranger we hesitate to trust. In this way, self-doubt is not just an emotion. It is a filter that rewrites our entire experience from the inside out. Because it operates beneath the surface, self-doubt often feels like an internal fog. We walk through life unsure if what we want or feel is legitimate, if the path we've chosen holds any real value, or if the person looking back at us in the mirror is truly worthy of love, success, or peace. The internal narrator fueled by doubt is relentless, telling stories of failure before we even begin, of judgment before we speak, and of inadequacy before we act. These stories become the framework through which we interpret our experiences, making challenges appear insurmountable and victories rare and fleeting. Over time, this internalized mistrust becomes so embedded it shapes our identity, not who we might be, but who we believe we must be to survive the relentless voice inside. Deep down, self-doubt is more than a personal enemy. It's a shadow cast by old wounds, fears, and the ego's desperate attempts to protect us from pain. The quiet battles we fight aren't always visible to the outside world, but they define the contours of our inner terrain. Trauma, especially when left unhealed, lays the groundwork for endless what-ifs and not-enoughs to take root. The ego often clings to these narratives, confusing fear with safety and comfort with truth. It shouts warnings about failure and rejection to keep us safe in familiar patterns, even if those patterns slowly erode our potential. This internal warfare tricks us into thinking we're avoiding pain, when in reality, we're blocking growth, stifling our true selves, and imprisoning our destiny within the limits of our fears. Each choice we make, whether to hide, to push forward, or to embrace change, is influenced by the stories our inner critic tells us. When fear of success whispers that we don't deserve achievements, we hold ourselves back from the very things that could transform our lives. When fear of peace convinces us that comfort lies in chaos and emotional addiction, we repeat cycles of suffering that feel like familiarity rather than freedom. The war is often not between external forces, but between the ego's illusions and the deeper truth of who we are beneath the self-doubt. Healing feels violent partly because it demands we dismantle these long-held beliefs, face what we've buried, and choose ourselves in the face of familiar pain. Yet this choice, choosing yourself, is the only way to rewrite the stories that shape your reality and step into the life that waits beyond doubt. One way to begin shifting this quiet war is by noticing the moments when self-doubt speaks the loudest and questioning its authority. Ask yourself whether the voice is protecting you or imprisoning you. Notice the difference between the ego's fearful stories and the calm truth that often lies beneath. Practice holding space for discomfort without surrendering to it. When you feel the pull of old narratives, try sitting with the emotions rather than reacting. In doing so, you start untangling belief from fact, courage from fear, and growth from hiding. This simple act of awareness plants a seed of transformation, the first breach in the wall that self-doubt has built around your reality. Strategies to silence the negative voice. The negative voice often whispers from deep within, echoing old wounds, fears, or stories we've been told about ourselves. It's born from places of trauma, doubt, or societal conditioning, an internal echo chamber that convinces us we're not enough, too much, or unworthy. This voice isn't random. It mimics the ones that have marked our formative years, the harsh words we absorbed, the failures we internalized, and the shame we carried silently. Recognizing it requires a brave, honest look at how these patterns have been woven into your identity over time. This voice tends to rear its head during moments of vulnerability, when you're on the edge of growth or change, and it questions your worth, your intentions, or your ability to succeed. It amplifies fears that success will change you, that peace isn't attainable, or that staying small is safer. Often, the critic disguises itself as your protector, a guardian trying to keep you from harm, but in truth, it keeps you confined, tethered to old fears and familiar misery. Identifying when it appears and tracing its roots reveals the familiar but false narrative it's spinning, a story built from the past, not the present. Understanding this voice isn't about fighting it outright. It's about listening without judgment. When you notice the critic's whispers, ask yourself, where did that thought come from? Whose voice does that sound like? Seeing it as a pattern, a reflection of unresolved wounds or false beliefs, strips some of its power. It's not the truth, merely a broken record playing from the background, waiting to be challenged by awareness and self-compassion. Silencing the critic begins with pause, opening space between the thought and your response. When the negative voice arises, instead of immediately believing it, breathe deeply, anchoring yourself in the present moment. Bring a gentle curiosity to what your mind is saying. Observe it without judgment. This simple act allows you to see that these thoughts are just that, thoughts, fleeting and not necessarily rooted in reality. With consistent practice, this mindful distance weakens the critic's hold, turning automatic objections into passing clouds instead of storms. Factoring in compassion opens the door to genuine change. Recognize that the critic is often a wounded part of you trying to protect you, albeit in unhealthy ways. Talk to it as if you're comfortingly speaking to a frightened child. Acknowledge its presence and then gently remind it that you are safe now, that growth and peace are possible without undoing everything that made it feel necessary to criticize. Inner dialogue becomes a tool for kindness rather than combat, allowing you to reframe negative assumptions and replace them with affirmations rooted in self-truth. Intentional self-awareness creates a counter-narrative. When the critic's voice sounds loud, choose a phrase or mantra that counters its message. If it whispers, "You're not good enough," respond with, "I am enough, just as I am." Writing down these affirmations or repeating them quietly can create a new pattern, one where self-compassion replaces self-criticism. Over time, these gentle acts don't just quiet the voice. They shift your inner environment, making it a place where growth, peace, and authenticity can thrive. Remember that silence isn't about suppression, but about transforming reactive shouting into quiet, steady validation. Practicing mindfulness and compassionate dialogue sustains this inner peace. A useful tip is to set aside a few moments each day solely dedicated to observing your thoughts without attachment. Think of it as tending a delicate garden. You water the good, acknowledge the weeds, and gently remove what doesn't serve. This ongoing practice helps dismantle the compelling power that the negative voice has built and gradually rewires your mind towards self-trust. Silence isn't achieved through force, but through patience, kindness, and a commitment to genuine self-awareness that refuses to be silenced by old fears. Chapter 2. The Inner Child versus the Adult Self. Healing the wounded inner child. The echoes of childhood experiences often lurk in the shadows of our minds, quietly influencing how we perceive ourselves and interact with the world. The wounded inner child carries the weight of past traumas, fears, and unmet needs. This part of ourselves can manifest in various ways: feelings of inadequacy, harsh self-criticism, or a deep-seated fear of abandonment. When we encounter moments of stress or conflict, it is often this wounded inner child that emerges, triggering reactions that seem disproportionate to the present situation. Understanding these silent echoes means recognizing their origins and acknowledging the unresolved pain they carry. Our subconscious is like a repository of memories and emotions, often storing experiences we wish to forget. For instance, a minor criticism from a boss might trigger feelings of hurt and self-doubt, because somewhere deep inside, the inner child remembers being scolded by a parent. This is not just old baggage. It shapes the identity we present to the world, often leading us to wear masks that hide our true selves. The adult we show up as may be calm and competent, but beneath the surface, the inner child might feel abandoned, unheard, or unloved. Healing begins with the recognition that this wounded inner child still exists within us, waiting for acknowledgement and care. It requires confronting the emotional ghosts of our past, those memories that linger and shape our behaviors more profoundly than we realize. It is not merely about recalling these events, but revisiting them with compassion and understanding. By allowing ourselves to feel those buried emotions, we begin to rewrite the narrative we've been living under. This involves acknowledging the hurt and validating the experiences of our younger selves. As we build a dialogue with this inner child, we start to nurture those fractured parts, offering them kindness and acceptance. This could look like visualization exercises, where you imagine providing comfort to your inner child. Speak to them as you would to a dear friend, offering reassurance and understanding. The process is about transforming the internal landscape from one filled with fear and shame into a space of acceptance and love. Rewriting our story also involves setting boundaries and challenging the inner critic that often silences our wounded voices. Each time we assert our needs or express our feelings, we empower that inner child, helping them realize that their voice matters. By taking these steps, we learn to embrace our complexities, recognizing that healing is not a linear journey, but rather a continual process of growth. Pay attention to the moments when your inner child feels triggered. Are there specific situations or words that evoke a strong emotional response? Journaling can be a helpful tool here, allowing you to explore these triggers and gain insights into the deeper narrative. Over time, as you cultivate a relationship with this wounded part of yourself, you will find that the power these memories hold diminishes, leading to a more integrated and authentic existence. The mature self and emotional resilience. The mature self is not some distant ideal or perfect version of who you want to become. It's the worn, wise presence that sits with every part of your story, the bruises, the triumphs, and the contradictions. Instead of running from the past wounds that shaped you, this self allows those scars to coexist with present strengths, weaving them into a quiet form of power. Emotional resilience arrives not from avoiding pain, but from meeting it without losing yourself. It's the integration of shadow and light, the worn edges softened by acceptance but sharpened by awareness. In that meeting, authenticity doesn't ask you to be flawless but invites you to be whole, carrying every fragment of your fractured history as a source of quiet courage. This self does not erase inner turmoil or silence the inner critic's roar. It listens, understands, and then chooses what deserves space in the mind and heart. The mature self recognizes trauma loops, not as chains that bind, but as echoes that can be traced and understood, eventually transforming from repetitive pain into lessons of survival and growth. Here, the fragile adult and the wounded child find their conversation, a space where both can exist without war. The tension between who you have been and who you are becoming softens, leaving room for something both raw and refined. It's a foundation grounded in authenticity, not in pretending or hiding, but in the steady murmur of truth that calibrates your choices. Emotional resilience is not about armored detachment or denying the messy layers underneath our skin. It's about conscious choices that hold vulnerability as a form of strength. Choosing to show up with your cracks visible, rather than covered, demands courage. This courage is not loud or flashy. It is quiet and persistent, like a steady flame that refuses to be snuffed out by the winds of fear or shame. Every moment you let the internal conflicts breathe instead of burying them, you transform those battles into something potent, a source of clarity and inner power. It's in recognizing when fear of success or peace is simply the ego's resistance to change that you learn to lean into discomfort without folding or fleeing. The mature self understands that wounded parts will always whisper, sometimes scream, and that's part of the journey. But it is also the voice that decides whether that scream becomes the script you live by or just background noise. By choosing vulnerability alongside courage, you reclaim your story from emotional addiction and trauma loops that once held you hostage. This is not about perfection, but about showing up for the unseen war inside yourself with honesty and boldness. The art of choosing yourself means saying yes to the hard truths, no to old lies, and building a life where inner peace is not a distant dream, but a real, touchable place within you. It's the battle between who you are and who you pretend to be, settled not with force, but with steady, deliberate willingness to be true. Practice this daily. Notice where hiding feels easier than healing, where silence feels safer than speaking your truth. Then choose differently. Let vulnerability be your sword, and courage your shield as you walk the jagged path toward the mature self. With every choice grounded in this heart space, emotional resilience grows, not as armor, but as a living pulse beneath your skin, shaping your destiny. Balancing innocence and responsibility. Within each of us, there is a quiet tug-of-war between the innocence of the inner child and the weighty demands of the adult self. The inner child craves freedom, play, and validation, seeking reassurance that the world is safe and that love is unwavering. It clings to wonder and vulnerability because these feelings make us feel alive and connected. Yet, outside, the world continually tests innocence through harsh judgments, disappointment, and the relentless pressure to conform. This vulnerability, once cherished, can feel fragile in a landscape that often rewards strength over softness, pushing us to hide or suppress that tender part of ourselves. In doing so, innocence becomes a secret part of us, tucked away behind layers of armor we think are necessary for survival. The adult self, meanwhile, is driven by responsibility. It is the voice that says, "You have to grow up." It demands accountability, maturity, and control. This part of us understands that safety requires boundaries, discipline, and sometimes sacrifice. It insists that we face reality, even when reality feels cold or unkind. Holding responsibility often stifles the freshness of innocence, making us numb and disconnected from the joy of just being. But responsibility need not be the enemy of innocence. Instead, it can act as a guide, helping us protect our vulnerabilities rather than suppress them. This dance between the two suggests that neither innocence nor responsibility is inherently better. They are intertwined aspects of our human experience, each calling for validation in different moments. One of the core challenges is learning to honor our inner child's desire for safety and lightness, while recognizing the weight of adult obligations that demand growth and accountability. This isn't about abandoning responsibility for innocence or vice versa. It means understanding that responsibility can be compassionate and that innocence can be resilient. For example, a person might be responsible for their family but still allow space for wonder and play. A leader might demand high standards but treat themselves and others with empathy, acknowledging that beneath the responsibilities lie sensitive, imperfect beings. The key is in cultivating an environment, inside and out, that allows innocence to flourish without neglecting the need to handle life's responsibilities authentically and consciously. Finding this balance often feels like walking a tightrope, especially when guilt, shame, or fear of failure come into play. It's common to think that growing up means losing innocence, that responsibility kills joy. But maturity is more nuanced. It's about embracing both qualities as parts of a whole. Innocence tempered with awareness can guide us to act with kindness and humility, even in tough situations. Responsibility rooted in compassion can protect that innocence from exploitation or harm. When we harmonize these forces, we create space to be authentically ourselves, vulnerable enough to feel deeply, responsible enough to act intentionally. Recognizing that growth isn't about losing innocence, but integrating it into a healthier version of responsibility might just be the most profound act of self-love. A practical way to nurture this balance is through conscious self-awareness. Ask yourself in moments of decision, am I acting out of fear, guilt, or obligation, or am I honoring my core feelings and needs? Learning to pause, breathe, and listen can reveal whether you're leaning too far into responsibility as a shield or into innocence as avoidance. Sometimes, gently granting yourself permission to feel vulnerable, to play, or to rest can restore inner harmony. Other times, setting clear boundaries or making tough choices is necessary to uphold your integrity without sacrificing your innocence. Remember, balancing these aspects is not about perfection but about presence, being honest with where you are now and choosing thoughtfully to evolve from that place. Chapter 3: Comfort, Growth, and the Fear of Change. The seduction of comfort zones. Comfort zones wrap around us like a soft blanket, promising to protect us from the harshness of the world. They feel safe and familiar, allowing us to carve out a space where the noise of our internal battles can be muted. This shelter offers a reprieve from vulnerability, making it easy to stay put. The allure of comfort lies in its soothing embrace, lulling us into a state of complacency where growth is stifled. Within this space, we become adept at avoiding risks, convinced that staying within these confines will keep us safe from failure, or worse, disappointment. Yet, as alluring as this sanctuary may be, the truth is deeply unsettling. The comfort zone often becomes a prison, one we build ourselves, with walls fortified by our fears and doubts. This refuge breeds stagnation, leading to an internal conflict between who we are and who we could become. We start to confuse this familiar territory with actual fulfillment, mistaking the absence of discomfort for the presence of satisfaction. As we cling to these well-trodden paths, opportunities for growth slip through our fingers, like butterflies evading our grasp. The psychological costs of remaining in our comfort zones are profound. We might experience a growing sense of unfulfillment, marked by a nagging whisper from our inner selves, urging us to step outside. This inner critic, often fueled by the fear of change, tells us that we aren't ready, that now is not the right time. Yet, this voice belongs to the part of us that thrives on predictability, resisting the unknown that lies beyond the walls of comfort. When we choose to ignore this nagging voice, it morphs into resentment, longing, and sometimes even despair. Choosing discomfort requires a courageous act of rebellion against that inner voice. The journey toward transformation is rarely comfortable. It feels violent in its upheaval, forcing us to confront the shadows we have long avoided. Healing isn't always gentle. Sometimes, it comes with fierce storms that shake the very ground we stand upon. It's in these moments of chaos, when we challenge ourselves to brave the unfamiliar, that true growth begins. The work is silent and often invisible, yet it shapes our identities and destinies in ways that comfort will never allow. Breaking free from the seductive grip of comfort zones might feel daunting, but it is essential for real change. Start by embracing small moments of discomfort. Initiate that difficult conversation, take on a project that intimidates you, or simply step outside your daily routine. By acknowledging and leaning into the discomfort, we not only reclaim our power, but also learn invaluable lessons hidden in the shadows. Growth is waiting just beyond the threshold. All it requires is the brave choice to step forward. Why growth feels threatening. Growth does not arrive wrapped in ribbons and applause. It sneaks in like a whisper of unrest, shaking the ground beneath who we think we are. At its core, growth threatens the very fabric of our comfort because it pulls us away from familiar places carved out by years of habit, pain, protection, and compromise. We cling to what we know because inside that familiarity, even if it's flawed or painful, lives a version of ourselves we recognize. Changing that means stepping into the unknown, where the eye we've nurtured begins to dissolve and rearrange itself. This dissolution feels like an erasure, like losing the identity we've depended on like armor. Subconsciously, we fear that if we become someone new, the old parts will vanish into nothingness. The inner critic thrives on this fear. It whispers that growth equals loss, failure, and abandonment by the self we call home. Growth demands a surrender to vulnerability, exposing the soft underbelly we usually guard against, and that scares us more than the tight cage we live in. Comfort, no matter how limiting, wraps around us like a safe blanket. It's the version of ourselves we can predict and control, while growth challenges our control, forcing us into unfamiliar emotional terrain. The battle between the inner child and the adult self intensifies here. The inner child clings tightly to pain and identity, woven from family narratives and past wounds, believing that holding on is the only way to survive. Growth asks the adult self to negotiate with this child, to show up and choose differently, which feels like betrayal or erasure. What if the growth we seek is not a violent ripping away, but a gentle untangling of the knots we've tied to keep ourselves safe? Yet, this untangling is felt as violence internally because it disrupts the peace of our illusions. Resistance to change bubbles up from deep emotional wells where trauma, fear, and addiction to familiar pain reside. The spirit itself seems to hesitate, caught between the desire for freedom and the comfort of chains. When transformation feels like violence, it's because it forces us to look at the parts of ourselves we've hidden, shame, regret, fear, that we'd rather leave buried. This resistance is not a sign of weakness, but a raw defense mechanism trying to keep our psyche whole, even if that wholeness is an illusion. Facing this resistance is like stepping into a dark room where shadows play tricks on the eyes. But beyond these shadows lies clarity. As we hold steady through the discomfort, the resistance begins to soften. What once felt like a losing battle turns into a profound act of reclaiming our true selves beyond societal masks, trauma loops, and the emotional addictions to feeling stuck. Growth offers a paradox. It destroys the old illusion of safety, but opens a door to a deeper peace that no longer depends on pretending or hiding. Transformation invites us to choose ourselves in ways that feel radical because they involve standing against the voices of doubt inside us. It's a quiet war where every step toward genuine change feels like a battlefield scar. Yet, with every scar, we gain a clearer sense of freedom, not freedom from struggle, but from the chains of needing to be anyone but who we are. This is the art of choosing ourselves, a choice that can feel like violence to the ego but is, in truth, an act of profound healing and truth. Growth, then, is less about becoming someone entirely new and more about peeling back layers that no longer serve us. Each layer feels like a loss because it is, but this loss clears space for something far richer, a life rooted not in fear or pretense, but in authentic connection to ourselves. The resistance will never disappear completely because it is part of the human condition, but meeting it head-on changes the rules of engagement. We learn that growth doesn't have to feel like a war zone. It can become a battlefield where peace is the prize. Embracing discomfort as a path to transformation. Discomfort has a way of sneaking into our lives, often disguised as fear, doubt, or pain. We tend to avoid it at all costs because it whispers that something is wrong, that we should turn away or retreat. Yet, beneath that resistance lies a secret. Discomfort is the soil where transformation takes root. When you dare to sit with the unease, you strip away superficial layers of who you think you are and come face to face with the raw, unfiltered parts of yourself. This is where true clarity begins. By stopping the constant fight against the pain, you allow it to teach you. Each moment you resist discomfort, you delay growth. Each time you embrace it, you move closer to understanding your inner landscape. Behind every quiet storm within, whether it's anxiety about failure or shame lingering from the past, there exists an invitation to learn something deeply true about yourself. When you lean into discomfort instead of avoiding it, you start dissolving the illusions that keep you small. That struggle, that vulnerability, is not something to be fixed or escaped from. It is the process of peeling away the layers of protection you've built around your core. Growth happens in these quiet battles, in the moments you choose to confront what frightens you instead of numbing or hiding from it. It's in this willingness to stay present with the pain that you begin to see your fears for what they are, temporary illusions and opportunities for deepening your awareness. Embracing discomfort transforms your inner world from a battleground into a workshop of awakening. It's a subtle shift, but it makes all the difference. Instead of fighting the discomfort, you learn to see it as a necessary step on the path. Every time you welcome discomfort, you're signaling to yourself that you are willing to grow, to change, to evolve. This process demands honesty and patience, recognizing that discomfort is not an enemy, but a teacher pointing to areas in need of healing or understanding. The more you practice accepting the uneasy moments, the more resilient and clear you become. Over time, discomfort no longer catches you off guard. It becomes the sacred thread woven into your journey of becoming your truest self. The first step is to start noticing when discomfort shows up without trying to push it away. Pay attention to physical sensations, tightness, heat, a fluttering in your stomach, and acknowledge them without judgment. Instead of rushing to fix or escape, simply breathe deeper and stay present. Honor the fact that this unease is part of your growth, not a mistake or failure. By shifting your mindset, seeing discomfort as a gift, you invite a new level of acceptance. From here, sit with the feelings long enough to observe what thoughts or memories are fueling them. Often, discomfort is driven by old stories that no longer serve you, but they cling on because of familiarity. Learning to surrender also means choosing curiosity over avoidance. Ask yourself what this discomfort might be revealing, perhaps a hidden belief, an unmet need, or a buried desire. Take small steps to lean into these truths, even if it's just sharing a vulnerable thought with someone you trust or doing a discomforting activity intentionally. You don't have to rush into radical change overnight. Slow, mindful exposure allows you to build trust with yourself. Over time, this practice rewires your response. discomfort becomes less threatening and more a gateway to authenticity. Remember, every moment you stay present with what feels uncomfortable, you chip away at the barriers that keep you disconnected from your own depth. Small acts of surrender create a momentum that gradually transforms pain into power and fear into freedom. Keeping a simple reminder that discomfort is part of growth can help anchor you during difficult times. When you notice resistance surfacing, gently remind yourself, this is what growth looks like. Write it down, repeat it in your mind, or create a mantra that honors the process. The more you practice embracing the uneasy, the more familiar it becomes. It's not about conquering the discomfort, but learning to dance with it, recognizing it as a sacred, inevitable part of becoming your fullest self. With each step forward, you reclaim your ability to sit in the fire of transformation and come out stronger, more clear, and more alive. The key is in consistently choosing to stay, no matter how loud the inner critic or how tempting the urge to hide. The quiet war within might never fully disappear, but as you embrace discomfort, you begin to master the art of turning internal chaos into clarity. Chapter 4: Ego versus Truth, the Battle for Authenticity. Defining ego and its role. The ego operates behind the scenes of our consciousness, shaping our identity in subtle yet profound ways. Like an artist with a hidden brush, it paints our self-perception with strokes of insecurity, pride, and pretension. Our ego develops early on, often as a shield against the harsh realities of life. It builds walls, creating an image of ourselves that we present to the world, a version that is often far from our true essence. While this facade can provide a sense of security, it also keeps us locked in a cycle of superficiality, preventing us from experiencing the depth of our true selves. The way we react to challenges, the choices we make, and even our relationships can be traced back to the dictates of the ego. For instance, when faced with criticism, the ego may respond with anger or defensiveness, rather than reflection and growth. This reaction often stems from a deep-seated fear of being unworthy or unloved. It influences how we see ourselves in relation to others, leading to a distorted perception that can hinder our ability to connect authentically. Our ego constructs an identity that is often brittle and desperately in need of validation, ignoring the more profound truths of who we are at our core. Recognizing the ego's role in our lives is pivotal for true transformation. Acknowledge how it influences your thoughts and feelings. Begin to explore moments of discomfort rather than fleeing from them. Allow yourself the space to peel back the layers and uncover your truth. Healing begins when you confront the ego's narratives and choose a different path, one that invites awareness and acceptance of your authentic self. As you question the stories that the ego tells you, remember that the journey inward, though often challenging, is where true freedom begins. The pursuit of truth in a self-deceptive world. There's a quiet war raging inside you, a clash between your longing for truth and the comforting lies you tell yourself. Deep down, you crave clarity, an honest reflection of who you are, but the mind often resists this with clever tricks. Self-deception doesn't roar. It creeps in softly like a shadow, promising safety while quietly eroding your sense of self. It's the delicate tension between the person you show the world and the person you whisper to in moments of silence. Truth feels raw, often uncomfortable, and it forces you to face parts of yourself you'd rather leave buried. Yet, self-deception wraps those painful pieces in layers of denial, distraction, or justification. This internal struggle shapes how you see yourself and how you act in the world. When you avoid truth, you become a captive of old wounds, recurring patterns, and fears that pull you backward. The war between who you truly are and who you pretend to be becomes a battlefield where identity is forged and fractured simultaneously. The mind's resistance to truth isn't just about fear, it's about survival. Our ego crafts stories to protect us from feeling exposed or unworthy, painting illusions that feel safer than reality. This push and pull create what feels like a constant internal noise, a voice that criticizes, defends, hides, and sometimes even confuses. Yet, beneath this turmoil lies a silent invitation to stop hiding and to meet yourself without judgment. The real war isn't outside but within, where the armor of deception must be set aside so the heart can speak freely. Facing truth means stepping into vulnerability, a place most avoid because it's messy and unpredictable. It's the moment you stop lying to yourself about who you are, what you want, and how you've been hurting or hiding. This isn't a one-time act, but a practice, an ongoing commitment to choose authenticity even when it feels dangerous. The world around you often rewards illusion and pretenses. Success is wrapped in performances and masks. Yet, choosing truth offers freedom, a clear path forward that, while often difficult, dissolves the confusion and inner conflict that weigh you down. To embrace this courage requires a kind of gentle brutality. You need to hold your fears, shame, and failures in one hand and your hope, curiosity, and self-compassion in the other. When you slow down enough to hear what's beneath the surface, the pain hiding as anger, the jealousy wrapped in humor, the loneliness dressed as busyness, you start peeling back the layers constructed to fool both others and yourself. By doing this, you reclaim parts of your soul you never realized you'd abandoned to survival stories and emotional addictions. Authenticity is a quiet rebellion against living a life scripted by lies or avoidance. It's about accepting the pieces of you that don't fit the neat narratives you or society have written. This radical honesty doesn't mean exposing every thought or feeling without boundaries, but it calls for a relentless honesty internally, acknowledging your fears and desires, recognizing your wounds, and allowing those truths to guide your choices. When you choose this path, the tension between who you are and who you pretend to be begins to ease, and the relentless inner critic softens into a wise companion. One practical way to start this process is to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Notice when you catch yourself rationalizing or hiding a truth. Instead of pushing it away, ask why you feel the need to escape. What story are you telling yourself that keeps you safe but stuck? Writing down these moments can turn invisible battles into visible landmarks, helping you recognize patterns that keep you trapped in self-deception. The act of naming what you avoid lets you break the cycle and transforms the war inside into a path toward healing. Living authentically amidst internal noise. Inside each of us lurks a persistent hum, a chaos of doubts, fears, assumptions, and voices that never truly settle. This internal noise distorts how we see ourselves and the world, muffling our genuine voice beneath layers of conditioned responses and defensive masks. The inner critic whispers relentless judgments, telling us we're not enough or that we're wrong for simply being who we are. Simultaneously, the inner child longs to be seen, loved, free from the weight of shame, while the adult strives for calm and clarity amid the constant storm. Recognizing this cacophony is the first step toward living more authentically, but it's rarely enough without understanding how these voices shape us and keep us tethered to illusions of who we should be. This noise doesn't just exist in our heads. It seeps into our actions, our relationships, even how we understand our own worth. We often wear masks, pretending to be what will garner acceptance or avoid rejection. We speak what we think others want to hear, hide parts of ourselves in shame, or retreat into comfort zones for fear of vulnerability. These masks cling tightly because the real self feels unsafe and fragile under the weight of internal chaos. What is natural and true gets drowned out by the relentless broadcasting of self-doubt, old trauma echoes, and ego's false bravado. Living amid this storm requires courage to distinguish the noise from the voice of authenticity that often whispers softly beneath all the layers. Practically, cultivating presence becomes an anchor in this storm. It's about learning to pause, breathe, and listen without immediately reacting. When you notice the inner critic sharpening its claws or the inner child trembling with unresolved pain, simply acknowledge those voices. Don't argue or suppress them. Just observe, as a scientist studies the weather. Over time, this noticing weakens their hold, allowing clarity to seep through. Meditation, mindful breathing, or even setting aside a moment each day to sit quietly can create enough space to hear your true self beyond the noise. Sometimes, it's helpful to ask yourself what you genuinely want in a moment, beyond the expectations or fear, then test whether that desire aligns with your deeper truth. Every effort to tune into this deeper voice rewires your internal landscape, slowly peeling away illusions and revealing the core of who you really are, unmasked and free. Living authentically means choosing to hold space for all parts of yourself, the critic, the child, the adult, and allowing each to be heard without judgment. It is not about the absence of noise, but about having the clarity to distinguish the real beneath the false. Sometimes, this involves letting go of stories that no longer serve you and embracing discomfort for the sake of truth. It is a quiet rebellion against the chaos, a deliberate decision to listen inward instead of defaulting to external validation. That process can feel violent at times because it challenges the familiar, even if that familiarity is rooted in suffering or illusion. The act of choosing authenticity is an act of bravery, one that demands patience, persistence, and a gentle willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. If you keep returning your attention inward, even amidst the clamor, you gradually refine the skill of living as your true self amid chaos, not in spite of it. A simple daily practice. Take moments of silence dedicated solely to deeply listening, without judgment, without agenda, and watch your inner landscape begin to clear, revealing the authentic voice that's always there, waiting to be heard. Chapter 5. Trauma Loops and Emotional Addiction. Understanding trauma repetition. Trauma repetition is like an uninvited guest that overstays its welcome, lurking in the shadows of our minds. We often find ourselves enmeshed in cycles of pain that feel all too familiar. These patterns can lead us back to the same emotional experiences over and over again. As strange as it seems, our minds cling to these memories and sensations, drawn to the comfort of the known, even when it is toxic. Think of it as an unbroken loop, where each painful experience reinforces our beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, nourishes the inner narrative we've crafted about our worth and our ability to connect with others. This narrative often anchors us in fear, shaping our choices and interactions. These unconscious loops are not merely a quirk of the psyche, they serve a purpose. They create a sense of predictability amid chaos. When faced with the unknown, the mind feels safer returning to what it has already endured, even if it is suffering. Have you ever noticed patterns in your relationships or work? Perhaps you attract the same kind of partner, or you tend to sabotage opportunities just as they arise. Each incident, though painful, feels strangely comfortable and familiar. This comfort, however, can masquerade as safety, obscuring the fact that it stifles growth. Recognizing these patterns is the first step in breaking free from the cycle. It requires a willingness to confront the discomfort of change, to sit with the unease of the unfamiliar. Understanding why we revisit trauma is essential. Psychologically, our brains are wired to protect us. When we encounter trauma, the brain forms defenses that may include denial, repression, or avoidance. These mechanisms can keep us in a state of limbo, where we rationalize our behavior and convince ourselves that we are fine, despite the turmoil underneath. Spiritually, there's a strong connection between unresolved trauma and our sense of identity. Many of us build our lives around these wounds, creating an identity that feels both authentic and burdensome. We become comfortable in discomfort, believing that's simply who we are. To recognize when we're in a cycle of self-sabotage, we must cultivate self-awareness. It requires honest introspection and often the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Awareness can be like a lighthouse shining through the fog. It illuminates patterns that we may have overlooked, showing how our reactions and choices are often driven by fear rather than clarity. Start by asking yourself reflective questions. What triggers your emotional responses? Are there recurring themes in your relationships or career? Consider keeping a journal to document these patterns, allowing you to see them more clearly. Engaging with a therapist or a supportive community can also bring insights, offering new perspectives on your experiences. Change is possible, and it often begins with a simple choice: to notice, to feel, and to take a step towards liberation. Embracing discomfort may lead you to realize that growth, while initially painful, ultimately brings forth the peace and authentic connection you crave. The vicious cycle of emotional dependency. Emotional dependency is a quiet, invisible chain that binds us to patterns we can't easily escape. It's that restless hunger for someone else's approval, validation, or love that keeps pulling us back into the same painful loops. We tell ourselves this time will be different, that we won't fall into old traps, yet somehow, the familiar ache of needing someone else to fill our inner emptiness repeats like a broken record. The cycle thrives because we confuse dependency with safety, believing that without another person's presence, our world will unravel. But underneath that belief lies a deeper truth. The real danger comes not from being alone, but from pretending that someone else can heal what we have yet to face inside. These loops often masquerade as love or loyalty, but they are built on shaky ground, a place where fear, shame, and unresolved wounds quietly fester. The quieter parts of ourselves, the inner child or the wounded self, beg for recognition, and until we meet that plea, we cling desperately to external anchors. Emotional dependency tricks us into thinking it's about connection when, in reality, it's about avoidance. The pain we fear, rejection, abandonment, feeling unworthy, hangs heavy, so instead of facing it head-on, we latch onto what seems like comfort. This invisible tether doesn't just trap us with others, it traps us inside ourselves, where the battle between who we are and who we pretend to be rages without cease. Often, emotional dependency shows up in cycles that feel violent, where the person we chase also becomes the source of our inner conflict. We become addicts to the emotional highs and lows, the moments of closeness followed by the crash of withdrawal. This rhythm mirrors the deeper trauma loops etched into our psyche, old wounds replaying beneath new dramas. In holding on too tightly, we lose sight of the delicate art of choosing ourselves. We confuse survival with growth, comfort with transformation, and end up stuck in a war between craving peace and fearing the stillness it requires. Breaking free from the chains of emotional dependency begins with the courage to look inward and face the raw truth beyond the masks we wear. This is not an act of violence against ourselves, but an invitation to lean softly into discomfort. Honest self-awareness asks us to witness the repeating patterns without blame or judgment, to see how our inner child's cry for love has shaped our adult choices. It means recognizing the moments when we slip into dependency, not as failures, but as signals, signposts pointing toward unfinished emotional work. This awareness is the first step in loosening the grip of the invisible tether. From this gentle acceptance, a new kind of courage grows, the courage to choose ourselves in ways that feel unfamiliar and brave. It's about breaking the habit of seeking someone else to fill our emptiness and learning instead how to hold our own pain with tenderness. This shift moves us from addiction to liberation, from reacting to rehearsed scripts toward responding with intentional presence. Choosing ourselves does not mean abandoning connection, but rather grounding it in wholeness rather than neediness. It requires patience with the inner process, practicing the art of being comfortable with solitude and silence. Space is often feared because they reveal the depth of our own presence. Healing these cycles is a messy, nonlinear dance between pain and growth. It demands that we unlearn survival tactics that once protected us, but now imprison us. As we begin to recognize the difference between genuine love and emotional hunger, we create space for new patterns to emerge. We learn to reparent the wounded parts of ourselves, offering acceptance where there was rejection and safety where there was chaos. This inner liberation invites us to experience life beyond the frantic chase of emotional highs and lows, toward a quiet strength where peace is not something to be earned or feared, but simply lived. In this place, the vicious cycle loses its power, and we step into a truer, freer version of ourselves. One practical step in this process is to practice naming your dependency moments as they arise. Noticing when you feel the pull to seek validation or rescue lets you pause. In that pause lies a choice, whether to look closer inside, breathe through the discomfort, or follow the familiar script. Over time, these small acts of self-awareness build the muscle of inner freedom, teaching us that we don't have to fight or flee from our inner world. Instead, we can stay with it, hold space for growth, and rewrite the story of who we are beyond the chains of emotional need. Breaking free and reclaiming power. Trauma loops are like ghosts we carry inside, replaying stories of shame, betrayal, and pain long after their cause has faded. These cycles keep us trapped in emotional addiction, where the familiar pain feels safer than the uncertainty of change. It's a paradox. The very thing that harms us, our unresolved wounds, becomes a comfort because it's known. But staying stuck in that loop isn't freedom. It's a slow, silent death to our authentic self. Breaking free begins with radical honesty. We have to stop sugarcoating our pain, our fears, and our deepest doubts. Only when we admit that these patterns are in us, not just outside of us, do we start to loosen their grip. It's a brutal truth. Facing the dark parts of ourselves requires more courage than hiding behind our defenses, but it is the gateway to reclaiming our power. Reclaiming that power demands intentionality. We can't heal by accident or through half measures. It's a decision, a conscious act of taking back the reins that trauma and fear have tried to snatch away. This often means unraveling nested fears that have grown like vines around our hearts. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of being truly seen. Because underneath all of those is the fear of losing control, of transforming into someone unrecognizable. The process of healing is not linear. It's a jagged, sometimes violent journey that forces us to confront the false narratives we've built about ourselves. To break free, we must choose to look at these fears not as enemies, but as signposts, indicators of what needs love, patience, and attention. Reclaiming power begins with understanding that we are not our trauma, and that the only true prison is the story we cling to about being powerless. Confronting trauma is also reconfiguring how we relate to it. Instead of seeing pain as a scar that defines us, we can learn to view it as a mirror, showing us where our wounds are so we can heal them, not hide from them. This requires an attitude of radical acceptance, sitting with discomfort rather than running from it, listening to the parts of ourselves that we've silenced. Healing often feels like violence because it demands we tear down the walls we've built around our vulnerabilities, expose our raw edges, and face what we've long avoided. But in that act of destruction, there's also tremendous creation, the opportunity to forge a deeper, honest version of ourselves. Choosing healing over hiding is an act of rebellion against the forces that keep us small, a declaration that we deserve peace and authenticity more than comfort borrowed at the expense of our growth. Reclaiming your power is not about perfecting yourself or erasing your history. It's about daring to be honest, to look in the mirror and say, without apology, I am my scars, my fears, my pain, and I am still choosing to rise. It's about recognizing that you always had the capacity to heal, to grow beyond your trauma, but that it requires your active participation, not passive hope. The act of healing is wrapped in patience, persistence, and an unwavering willingness to face the darkness within. When you understand that your true power lies in your capacity to choose yourself, day after day, moment after moment, you reclaim your narrative from the grips of past pain. That's how you break free, by owning your story, asserting your worth, and daring to live differently than the cycle that kept you confined for so long. Chapter 6. The Fear of Success and the Fear of Peace. Why success can be scary. the idea of success often brings an unexpected weight. Deep down, success feels like entering a spotlight that exposes every flaw and insecurity. It can trigger something primal within us, a fear of not being worthy, of not being able to maintain that success, or of losing our sense of belonging. This fear lives just beneath the surface, wrapping itself around our aspirations with a tight grip. It's like we stand on the edge of a cliff, gazing at the beautiful view of success, while an internal voice keeps whispering that we are not ready to jump. This fear manifests as self-sabotage. We might procrastinate, create excuses, or even sabotage our efforts deliberately. This behavior isn't rooted in laziness or lack of ambition. Instead, it stems from a deep-seated belief that we must protect ourselves from the perceived dangers of success. The inner critic springs into action, loudly proclaiming that we will fail, that we don't deserve this, or that achieving our dreams will only lead to destruction. Naturally, when we engage in self-destructive behaviors, we remain in our comfort zone, clinging to the familiar pain and struggle rather than take the leap of faith. Success and peace, two pursuits that should be straightforward, often clash within us. As we strive for success, we might find fleeting moments of happiness dominated by an underlying sense of chaos. Peace, on the contrary, asks us to confront unresolved issues, dark thoughts, and old wounds. The pursuit of peace can feel terrifying because it compels us to acknowledge our past experiences and traumas. In this space, we feel vulnerable, stripped of our defenses, and susceptible to judgment, not only from others but from ourselves. The paradox of inner peace. Inner peace often feels like a quiet battlefield, where the mind's desperate craving for stillness collides with some of the deepest, most stubborn fears we carry. We want calm, but beneath that desire lies fear, not just fear of discomfort, but fear of what peace actually demands from us. It threatens the stories we've lived by, the protective layers we have wrapped around ourselves. The mind imagines peace as a soft place to land, but it often feels more like stepping off a cliff into an unknown void. We crave success, the approval that comes with achievement, yet we may also fear that peace will dull the edge we sharpen through struggle. Peace exposes us. It does not require a grand performance or endless motion. The paradox is that the pursuit of peace sometimes awakens wars within us we didn't even know were there, fighting between wanting to grow and wanting to stay safe in familiar pain. True inner peace isn't a passive state. It's a battleground where silence demands courage because the mind fears silence itself. In that silence, the ego's stories unravel, and all the noise we've used to hide starts to fade. The fear of peace is real. It feels like giving up control, like stepping into vulnerability without armor. When peace arrives, it sometimes threatens the identities we've built through conflict and chaos, making us face who we really are beneath the noise. This quiet rebellion inside us resists peace because peace asks us to drop the masks we hide behind. Ironically, the closer we get to peace, the more violent the inner resistance becomes, not outward violence, but a fierce struggle between the illusion of control and the reality of acceptance. The war isn't between us and the world. It's between parts of ourselves, the part that craves growth and the part that clings to survival through discomfort and distraction. Finding inner peace means moving beyond the illusion that peace is a destination where everything neatly falls into place. It demands seeing the mind not as a calm lake, but as a stormy sea that we slowly learn to navigate rather than fight. The paradox is rooted in how we equate peace with failure, stagnation, or loss. We fear peace because, in peace, all pretenses drop away. We no longer have the option to hide behind competitive success, emotional drama, or endless planning. Peace forces us to stand face to face with our fears, the fear of success, of being seen fully, of peace itself, which feels like a kind of death and rebirth happening simultaneously. Peace asks us to meet our discomfort rather than avoid it. It calls for a radical honesty about who we are and what we have been running from. This is why inner peace can feel like surrender but also like a violent act against the habit of hiding. It dismantles the illusions of safety we build through constant doing, through busyness, distractions, emotional addictions. The quiet space of peace feels empty and terrifying because it exposes the wounds beneath the surface. But vulnerability in this space is not weakness. It's a profound surrender to the truth of our experience. To cultivate inner peace, we must be willing to break apart the stories we cling to, the identities stitched from fear, trauma, and the relentless pursuit of approval. We must sit with discomfort instead of pushing it away. Each moment of vulnerability in the stillness teaches us that peace does not demand perfection, nor does it silence the noise of the past instantly. Instead, peace is the willingness to let the noise be heard without reaction, to let the fear breathe without panic, and to trust that beneath the chaos of inner conflict lies a calm that is neither fragile nor conditional. When peace feels violent, it's because transformation always costs something. It asks us to choose ourselves over the comfort of familiar masks, to invite uncertainty instead of clinging to control. But that choice is also a kind of liberation, a return to a self that isn't fragmented by internal wars. The art of choosing yourself means allowing peace to be both a battlefield and a sanctuary. It means understanding that the inner war isn't a sign we are broken. It's proof that we are alive, growing, and learning the hardest fight of all, coming home to who we truly are. Next time you seek peace, remember it doesn't mean the absence of conflict, but the courage to sit with it. Don't rush to silence your inner critics or numb your fears. Instead, notice them, name them, and allow peace to find a foothold even as your mind trembles with uncertainty. It's in these moments of raw vulnerability that real calm begins to form, a peace that is not fragile but built on the unshakable willingness to be real with yourself, no matter how stormy things get. Overcoming fear to embrace fulfillment. Many of us carry a quiet fear of what happens when we finally step into the life we secretly desire. Success isn't always welcomed with open arms. It often carries a weight of expectation, loneliness, and the fear of losing what little peace we cling to. There's a whisper inside that warns us, what if this success changes how others see us? Or worse, what if it changes how we see ourselves? This fear blurs the line between the comfort of familiar pain and the dangerous promise of freedom. It's not just about failing. It's about what success might dismantle, an old, worn-out sense of safety that the mind clings to as a shield against the unknown. Peace, in its purest form, isn't some distant state to achieve, but a fragile refuge that we often sabotage. It feels safe to remain restless, busy, and distracted because facing stillness can unearth uncomfortable truths. The fear of peace is a fear of emptiness, of losing that drive which has kept us going, even if that drive is fueled by internal chaos. We look at calm as a threat, something that might unveil the things we're avoiding. But in reality, this peace beckons us to confront ourselves on a deeper level, to sit with the silence instead of running from it. The shadows of success and peace are so intertwined that one cannot often be fully embraced without unraveling the other first. Understanding the root of these fears is the first step. Often, the fear of success and peace comes from a narrative we absorbed early, stories that told us that if we shine too bright, we might be rejected, punished, or abandoned. To move beyond this, we must develop a conscious awareness that the mind's fear is often not rooted in reality, but in old, conditioned beliefs. One practical approach is to practice radical honesty with yourself. When the fear whispers, "What if I fail?" or "What if I lose myself?" acknowledge it without judgment and ask what truth lies underneath. Usually, the answer reveals that the fear is about losing control or being judged, not the event itself. From there, surrender becomes an act of tiny rebellions against the stories that keep you small. You start by choosing small acts of bravery, speaking your truth, setting a boundary, taking one risk that feels slightly uncomfortable. Each act chips away at the cloak of fear, revealing that beneath it is a resilient core eager to embrace life's fullness. Meditation or quiet reflection can create the space to sit with these fears, recognizing that they are just thoughts passing through. Lean into the discomfort rather than resist it. Fear grows when avoided, but dissolves when acknowledged as part of the human experience. Another way is to adopt a perspective of curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of labeling your fears as enemies, see them as messengers. Ask yourself what they are trying to protect you from and whether those protections are still valid. Redirect that energy towards self-compassion, allowing yourself to be imperfect and vulnerable. Remember, the thing we fear most, failure, rejection, peace, are often simply gateways to a more authentic life. It's about daring to surrender control and trusting that the unknown holds opportunities for growth, not doom. Finally, recognize that true transformation feels like a kind of violence, breaking away from old identities, narratives, and comforts that have kept you safe but also stuck. This process isn't smooth or gentle. It's a battlefield where you confront your inner critic, the ghosts of trauma, and the ego's desire for permanence. But with each act of courage, no matter how small, you are rewriting your relationship with fear. Giving yourself permission to fail, to feel lost, or to be quiet is the bravest step toward fulfillment. Keep reminding yourself that it's not about escaping fear, but about walking through it with open eyes and a willing heart. One practical tip: create a fear timeline where you chart out recurring fears and see how they've played out in your past. Often, you'll notice that what you feared was far worse in your mind than in reality. This awareness helps dismantle the power of fear. The more you confront it directly, the less control it has over your decisions and your destiny. Embrace the discomfort, knowing that beyond it lies the freedom and fulfillment you've been seeking all along. Chapter 7. The War Between Who You Are and Who You Pretend to Be. The Masks We Wear. Every day, we slip into a new skin, donning a mask that fits the situation, the audience, and often our own fears. These masks shield us from vulnerability and allow us to navigate the world with a semblance of control. But beneath each layer lies a silent conflict, whispering truths about who we are and who we pretend to be. The expectations from society, our families, and even our inner critics mold these facades. The overachiever, the jester, the caretaker, or the rebel. Each mask serves a purpose, but none reveal our true essence. These identities may feel comfortable in the moment, yet they often create an emotional prison that keeps us from genuine connection and self-acceptance. Behind the mask of confidence might lurk a deep-seated fear of inadequacy. The performer may crave applause but dread the judgment that comes with it. The nurturer might fear abandonment, creating boundaries that ultimately keep others at bay. Each of us is a patchwork of these personas, stitched together by a thread of insecurity, longing for validation, or a desire to fit in. The masks we wear serve as armor in our daily battles against the world, yet they can often misrepresent our true selves, distorting the narratives we tell ourselves. They protect us, but they also prevent us from experiencing the fullness of our human experience. Shedding these layers requires immense courage. It often feels like an act of surrender, relinquishing the control we believed we had over our identities. When we finally decide to remove the mask, we face the rawness of who we are, and that can be terrifying. Stepping into our authenticity means embracing our flaws, our fears, and the parts of ourselves that we often hide away. It is about facing the inner child, the one who craves safety and acceptance, as well as the inner critic, the harsh voice that constantly belittles our efforts. Reconnecting with this child can feel like a leap into the unknown, yet it holds the key to unlocking profound transformation. Embracing our true selves involves uncomfortable conversations, both with ourselves and with others. It means acknowledging the loud chorus of self-doubt and instead amplifying the voice of truth that reminds us we are enough, just as we are. This journey is not linear. It may require moments of retreat back into the comfort of our masks. But with each honest step we take, we grow more aligned with who we are meant to be. Finding the strength to choose authenticity over approval becomes a powerful act of self-love. The path forward may be riddled with challenges, but it also opens doors to deeper connections and a more fulfilling life. As you begin this journey of unmasking, consider journaling your thoughts and feelings that emerge when you engage with your true self. Reflect on the masks you wear. What do they protect you from? What might you feel if you took them off? Acknowledge that the path to authenticity is uniquely yours, filled with both challenges and revelations. Every small step towards embracing your true identity contributes to a life filled with richer experiences and genuine connections. Authentic self versus performance. There is a quiet war waged beneath the surface of who you are and who you show the world. It's not loud or dramatic, but it shakes the foundation of your very being. This conflict is born out of division. Your authentic self, raw and unfiltered, locked in battle with the performance you craft to belong, to protect, and to achieve. It's the face you put on in meetings, the smile you force in social gatherings, the confidence that feels more like armor than truth. These masks are born not from choice, but from necessity, woven from fear, expectation, and survival instinct. They speak in the language of should and must, drowning out the quiet voice of your true self, the one who feels deeply and fears just as much, but longs to be seen as is. When you act out of performance, you become a character in a story that isn't entirely yours. This is the person you believe others want to meet, the polished version, the one who is safe, in control, worthy. But underneath, your authentic self waits, restless and unseen, craving freedom from the roles you play. The tension between these two selves creates inner friction that often feels like anxiety, self-doubt, or a strange emptiness you can't quite explain. What starts as a strategy to navigate a complicated world slowly turns into a barrier that blocks you from your own heart. The war between being authentic and performing is silent, yet brutal, because it forces you to live as a fragmented being, unable to fully inhabit your own life. In some moments, you might catch a glimpse of this divide illuminated by a sudden loneliness or a sense of disconnection from yourself. You show strength in public, but retreat in private, guarding tender parts you can't bear to risk exposing. Every smile, every measured word can feel like a small betrayal, pulling you further away from your natural state. This conflict is not only psychological but spiritual, asking you what it means to be truly present, to live without the shield of performance. Your survival masks, while keeping external threats at bay, also keep the promise of authenticity out of reach, creating a cycle that can be as addictive as it is exhausting. Courage to be authentic is less about grand gestures and more about tiny acts of rebellion against the scripts that have been handed to you. It's a quiet refusal to accept the roles others assign, the expectations carved by your past pain, or the fear that safety only comes from camouflage. When you begin to shed these performances, you risk everything: approval, comfort, predictability, and step into the unknown territory of your own truth. This process often feels like pulling away from a familiar storm into uncertainty, where the wind might hit harder, but the air tastes freer. Embracing your authentic self means you stop protecting the parts of you that feel fragile and start inviting vulnerability in, with all its sharp edges and light. Fear is a heavy anchor here. Fear of rejection, of failure, of being too much or too little. Trauma adds layers, scripting out roles as shields, perhaps the angry one, the perfect one, or the invisible one, because those masks held the promise of survival once. To let go of them is to walk through fire knowing it might burn you, but also heal you. It's not easy or painless, yet it offers a kind of peace that performance can never provide. This peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of acceptance. When you dare to be seen without filters, you begin to collect the scattered parts of yourself, pieces lost in the fog of trying, hiding, and pretending. This gathering is slow, deeply intimate, and radical in its honesty. Choosing to live authentically calls up the silent wisdom of the inner child who yearns to be loved for exactly who they are, not what they do or perform. It means standing against the internal critic who demands perfection or silences your voice with harsh judgment. Growth here looks less like pushing and more like gentle breaking. Letting the masks fall away is both violent and tender, a tearing down so new life can bloom from the ruins. It's a daily choice, a fierce act of self-loyalty that reclaims your time, your energy, and your destiny. The more you embrace your true self, the less your ego needs to feed on performance, and the more you experience a different kind of success, not the kind measured by applause, but by an inner rhythm that feels right and true. One practical way to begin is to notice the moments when you feel most cramped or hollow. Ask yourself which mask you are wearing and why. What fears whisper behind that mask? With curiosity, allow yourself to acknowledge those fears without rushing to fix or flee. From that place of gentle attention, new possibilities open, spaces where you can choose differently, respond with honesty, and practice small acts of authenticity that grow into a new habit of being. This is not a path you walk once, but a continuous unfolding of courage, awareness, and radical acceptance that slowly dissolves the war between who you are and who you pretend to be. Aligning outer life with inner truth. Every day, you carry the weight of a persona crafted carefully over years, an image designed to fit the expectations of others or to hide parts of yourself you're afraid to face. This persona is often motivated by a desire to be accepted, successful, or safe, but it drifts further from who you truly are with each lie you tell yourself or others. When your outer life reflects something different from your inner truth, a dissonance begins to unfold, like a subtle tug-of-war inside your mind that never quite lets go. This conflict doesn't only stay in your head, it leaks into your actions, your relationships, and your sense of stability. The chaos manifests in small, almost unnoticeable ways. Being impatient with close friends, feeling hollow after a moment of success, or avoiding activities that threaten to peel back the layers of your false self. It shows up as exhaustion, anxiety, or a constant sense of pretending. You might find yourself repeating patterns that keep you stuck: procrastination, self-sabotage, or the tendency to wear a mask even in moments meant for authenticity. These are signs that your internal world and external life are misaligned. An unacknowledged dissonance will demand more energy just to maintain the illusion. Living in this split state creates a slow erosion of trust in yourself. You start questioning if the person looking back at you in the mirror is truly you or just a carefully curated image. Every small compromise to maintain that mask chips away at your confidence, making genuine connection itself feel risky. At the core, this conflict shakes your foundation, feeding into trauma loops and emotional addictions. Ways your mind clings stubbornly to old stories that keep you from stepping into your true self. Realigning the outer world with your inner truth requires a willingness to face discomfort head-on. It starts with honesty, breaking through the denial that you are someone you're not. This means consciously assessing where your life feels out of sync and asking simple questions. What parts of me am I hiding? Which behaviors or choices are driven by fear rather than authenticity? Once you identify these areas, you can begin to peel back the layers of the false self, piece by piece. The process isn't about perfection, but about courage. The courage to be seen as you really are, without shame or clinging to old defenses. Vulnerability becomes your greatest ally. Showing up authentically in relationships, taking responsibility for your truth rather than hiding behind justifications, and allowing yourself to feel everything that comes with honesty can feel like stepping into chaos. But that chaos is a sign of growth, a clearing out of the debris that's kept your inner world and outer life apart. Surrendering the need for control or the perfect image opens space for real change. It's a gradual act of trust, trusting that your true self is enough, and that even in the uncertainty of vulnerability, there is strength. Practicing small acts of authenticity daily, telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable, making choices aligned with what you value most, or simply admitting when you're scared, builds courage. Each moment becomes an opportunity to shed pieces of the false self and step closer to the person you're meant to be. Over time, living in alignment with your inner truth becomes less a task and more a natural response. A life rooted in authenticity isn't devoid of struggle, but it's anchored in integrity, where your outer actions reflect the truth you carry inside, no matter how messy or imperfect that truth might be. In the end, surrendering the false self isn't about losing yourself. It's about reclaiming who you've always been meant to be, whole, honest, and unhidden. Chapter 8. Healing versus hiding from pain. The temptation to avoid pain. Many of us are drawn to the idea of avoiding pain. It beckons like a comforter on a cold night, whispering promises of safety and warmth. This allure often leads us to empty distractions, emotional numbing, and shallow relationships. In these moments, we think we are protecting ourselves, but in reality, we are only delaying the inevitable confrontation with our true selves. Avoidance can wrap us in a false sanctuary, lulling us into a state of disconnection from our authentic existence. We become adept at sidestepping uncomfortable truths and burying our feelings under layers of projected calm. The emotional landscape of avoidance is often littered with familiar traps. Perhaps you scroll endlessly through social media instead of dealing with a nagging sense of inadequacy. Or you overindulge in food or drink, finding momentary pleasure while ignoring the deeper, unaddressed wounds. These distractions may feel good in the short term, but rob us of real connection and growth. Each moment spent evading pain is a moment we could have used to wrestle with our fears and uncover the layers of our identity. The more we avoid, the more disconnected we feel, and this they call numbing starts to feel like a normal state of being. To confront pain requires an extraordinary leap of courage. It demands we recognize that vulnerability is not our enemy. Instead, it is the pathway to true healing. The discomfort we often dread is a necessary component of transformation. Each slice of discomfort can lead to deeper understanding and self-awareness. Hiding only prolongs suffering, and the things we try to bury only seep into our lives, manifesting in anxiety, depression, and a persistent sense of discontent. The power of facing inner wounds. It takes a fierceness few are willing to claim, the courage to look directly at the parts of ourselves we hide away in shame or fear. These inner wounds feel like cold, raw places inside, aching and tender, yet so often we surround them with walls made of denial, distraction, or false personas. Our minds build illusions to avoid what feels unbearable: the grief of past trauma, the sting of rejection, the weight of unspoken pain. Pretending these wounds don't exist becomes a lifelong habit because admitting their presence means risking heartbreak all over again or confronting truths we once ran from. But those illusions, though comforting, keep us locked in a quiet war, a battle that consumes our energy, shapes our identity, and holds us back from real peace. Choosing to confront these wounds means stepping into an arena where your inner child, your adult self, and your ego wrestle fiercely. The ego fights to keep you safe in old patterns, whispering that vulnerability equals weakness. The inner child trembles, scared to relive pain, but yearning deeply for love and healing. Your adult self, if you listen closely, knows growth demands this collision. Facing what you've long avoided is not a single act. It's an ongoing commitment to break the cycle of emotional addiction to pain and fear. This is where comfort must give way to transformation, even when that transformation feels like violence tearing apart who you thought you were. It is both terrifying and liberating to stare into your darkness, but from that gaze comes the power to reclaim your life. When you accept pain authentically, it stops being an enemy and begins to reveal itself as a messenger. This kind of acceptance isn't passive. It's a radical act of self-love. Instead of suppressing or numbing your hurt, you invite it to speak, to be witnessed without judgment or shame. In that space, The quiet war no longer rages in secret, but comes into the light where it can be understood and unraveled. Facing pain reveals the distortions your mind has created, the stories that feed your inner critic, the loops replaying trauma like a broken record. It helps you see the lies you've told yourself to survive, the compromises that shaped your identity at the expense of your truth. This brutal honesty clears the way to heal rather than hide, to choose yourself over the roles you once played to feel safe. This process doesn't guarantee peace will come easily. Often, it means walking through the fire of your own suffering, where fear of success or fear of peace can linger as stubborn shadows. But each time you show up for yourself, each time you let go of pretending, you break a link in the chain that binds you to your past. You transform from someone who is hiding behind fragile masks into someone who lives with open eyes, embracing their full complexity. This act of choosing yourself forges a kind of strength that no external validation can ever match. In the stillness that follows, the quiet conflict softens, and the war within loses its grip just enough so that healing can unfold in its own time. A practical way to start facing your inner wounds is to create moments of honest reflection. When a harsh inner voice rises or a familiar fear grips you, pause and ask what old pain is surfacing beneath the surface. Notice without rushing toward judgment or solutions. Simply be present with what's uncomfortable, the trembling, the ache, the resistance. Writing down what you feel can help externalize the invisible. Over time, these small acts of witnessing break the spell of denial bit by bit. Remember, facing your wounds is not about fixing or erasing pain overnight. It's about showing up as your own ally in the quiet war, giving yourself permission to be both broken and whole at once. This is where real power lives, the raw, unpolished courage to tell your inner story without hiding, so you can finally begin to rewrite it. Transformative healing practices. Healing begins when we recognize that beneath every layer of resistance lies a tender truth longing to be seen. Many of us carry wounds so deep that facing them feels impossible, like poking at a bruise that still stings. Yet, it's often in those quiet, cautious moments of confrontation that we find the cracks in our armor. Instead of force or suppression, gentle honesty becomes the tool to dissolve the walls built around our pain. Walking this path is not about bulldozing through defenses, but rather about softening so that the truth can emerge naturally, like dawn easing out darkness. When we approach ourselves with tenderness, even amidst vulnerability, we begin dismantling the illusions that keep us hidden, revealing the authentic person beneath the armor we've crafted in fear. This process asks us to resist the urge to hide or pretend that everything is okay. It's about acknowledging the discomfort, the shame, and the resistance without judgment. By doing so, we create space for healing to enter instead of insisting that pain be hidden away. Pain that's ignored or buried cannot be truly healed. It festers beneath the surface, whispering through our bodies, our dreams, and our reactions. Choosing gentle confrontation doesn't mean surrendering. It means meeting each wound with humility and patience. Through consistent, compassionate awareness, the false stories we tell ourselves about our worth or the threat of vulnerability begin to fall away. Slowly, as we lean into the discomfort rather than resist it, the illusions that keep us naive about our true selves start to crack and crumble, revealing a resilience born of tenderness and truth. Healing requires more than just reflection. It demands rituals that anchor us in honest self-awareness while honoring our pain as part of the human story. Simple acts done consistently can serve as sacred anchors. Lighting a candle when you feel overwhelmed, writing a letter to your inner child, or initiating a quiet moment of breath when old fears resurface. These rituals create a bridge from hiding to healing, transforming suffering from a source of shame into an act of profound self-embrace. They become acts of rebellion against the forces that tell us to hide our scars and pretend we're fine. Instead, each ritual affirms our courage, no matter how small, that we are willing to face ourselves with honesty. When done with intention, these practices simply become parts of a larger act, reclaiming your story, forgiving your wounds, and showing up with bold honesty about who you are and what you carry inside. There's a particular power in rituals that acknowledge pain as sacred. You might place a stone on your windowsill as a reminder that suffering is tangible and transient. Or you could create a daily affirmation that affirms your worth in the face of fear or shame. The key is consistency and honoring your process, not forcing yourself into a mold or expecting immediate results. As you practice these rituals, you build resilience, quiet yet fierce, showing up for yourself when everything feels fragile. Over time, these acts of soulful intention begin to shift your internal landscape. Pain no longer remains a shadow you run from, but turns into a sacred dialogue, a step toward embracing your whole self with honesty, resilience, and quiet defiance against the inner war that keeps you hiding from your own truth. Chapter 9. Why Transformation Often Feels Like Violence. The Cost of Growth. Growth comes with a price, an unsettling truth that many of us grapple with. When we decide to expand our horizons or challenge ourselves, the chaos often follows closely behind. This turmoil can manifest in various forms: anxiety, fear, confusion, and even a sense of loss. The inner critic, that relentless voice of doubt, thrives during these upheavals, telling us we are unworthy or incapable. When we begin to shed the familiar, the comfortable parts of who we are, what we often find is an emotional battlefield where the struggle between the old self and the new one rages on. This inner conflict, however, is where the magic lies. Imagine standing at a crossroads. On one path is the security of the known, and on the other is the vast, uncharted territory of potential. Each step toward growth requires a surrender of sorts, a letting go of past identities or safe havens. This transition is not merely psychological. It often feels like a violent upheaval. Old friendships may falter as you change, dreams once cherished may dissolve, and goals you set may feel further away than ever. Yet, this tension is necessary for growth. It demands a willingness to confront the chaos head-on, to face the turmoil within from which we ultimately emerge stronger. Transformation can often feel harsh and raw, a type of psychological violence that shatters old frameworks. When we dare to face our deepest fears, fear of success, fear of peace, fear of truly showing up, we engage in a fight not just with outside influences, but with ourselves. This is where emotional addiction comes into play. We cling to old patterns and behaviors, not out of desire, but as a means of self-preservation. They feel safe, even when their underlying roots are poisonous. When confronted with change, the instinctive reaction is to recoil, to fear the unknown like a child frightened of the dark. To navigate this journey, it's essential to cultivate self-awareness and become attuned to the subtle shifts in our emotional landscape. Journaling can be a powerful tool, a place to articulate fears and dreams alike. When faced with the chaos, ask yourself, what am I truly afraid of losing? In identifying these fears, you can begin to dismantle the walls you've built around yourself. Ultimately, investing in growth is investing in yourself, and while the cost may feel daunting, the rewards, freedom, authenticity, fulfillment, are worth every bit of the sacrifice. Releasing old identities. Releasing old identities means looking straight into the masks we've worn for so long. These masks aren't just costumes. They've been the shields we hid behind to feel safe, the armor we donned to claim power, and the roles we played to belong. Each mask carries its own silent story, carved out of fear, hope, and the struggle to survive in a world that demanded we be someone else. When we begin to notice these masks cracking, the quiet war inside us sparks to life. This war isn't loud or visible, but it shakes the foundation of who we thought we were. The parts of us that clung to these identities resist fiercely, as if losing them means losing everything. Yet, beneath that resistance lies a raw, aching truth. the self we've been protecting might be the very thing blocking us from breathing fully. Letting go of these old skin-deep faces isn't gentle. It feels like violence to our soul because we're pushing hard against the powerful gravity of years, sometimes decades, of habit and self-deception. This pull is like a ghost dragging us back into known patterns, known fears, comfortable pain. But transformation isn't kind. It shakes us violently, breaking us open in ways that aren't neat or polite. Instead of a smooth unfolding, it feels like a storm, messy, chaotic, and terrifying. Yet, within this struggle lies the chance to shed the familiar and step into a version of ourselves that isn't tethered to who we pretended to be. It's a leap into uncertainty, a defiance of old stories, and a daring attempt to claim freedom from the quiet prisons we built inside our minds. This process demands courage because it forces us to face what we buried, lied about, or refused to change. And in doing so, it clears space for something new to grow, something true, something real. Embracing the pain of change. Understanding that embracing the pain of change is an act of profound honesty with oneself transforms the process from a dreaded confrontation into a necessary truth. Change doesn't arrive gently. It arrives as violence, a shake-up that tears away the familiar and forces us to confront parts of ourselves we'd rather hide. Our egos cling desperately to comfort, to being someone predictable, safe, understood. When we decide to change, that comfort is threatened, and the ego fights back, resisting the reality that nothing remains static. Embracing this pain is not about seeking suffering, but about acknowledging it as part of the journey towards something more real, more authentic. It's a process rooted in brutal honesty, facing the cracks in our identity rather than avoiding them, knowing that true growth often feels like tearing apart before it can be rebuilt. Learning to sit with that discomfort is one of the bravest acts we undertake. When you realize that growth involves vulnerability, you shift from fighting the pain to welcoming it as a teacher. It's in these quiet, often alone moments that we discover how much we're resisting what is. Instead of trying to push down or escape feelings of fear, shame, or grief, we can begin to recognize them for what they are. Signals that the internal war is happening. Sitting with the discomfort means giving yourself permission to feel everything that surfaces, from the impulse to run, hide, or numb to the deep ache of loss or failure. It's about surrendering, even if just a little, trusting that within that vulnerability lies the space for real change. That pain is not the enemy, but the herald of transformation. Change, especially the kind that leads to internal awakening, often feels violent because it strips away illusions that we hold about ourselves and the world. It's a tearing away of false identities, comfort zones, and stories we cling to for safety. When you attempt to reshape your life, to live more aligned with your truths, it's like ripping off a mask you've worn for years. Expect resistance from your ego. It'll cry out for the familiar, even if it's painful or unfulfilling. Remember, the pain isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something real. Embracing this pain, in all its raw honesty, creates the space for rebirth. The act of allowing yourself to feel this upheaval without denying it is a quiet rebellion against the false comfort of stagnation and a step closer to authenticity. Instead of fearing pain, view it as an essential part of your evolution. It's a sign that your inner world is shifting, shedding, and clearing space for growth. Don't rush to escape it or numb it. Instead, call upon your capacity to sit quietly within the chaos, knowing that every wave of discomfort carries within it the seed of a new beginning. The more you resist, the longer you prolong the suffering. The more you accept, the more you understand that pain is not the enemy, but a vital part of the process. A necessary ache that confirms you are moving toward a better version of yourself. Better to embrace the pain and walk through it than to hide from it in the shadows, never truly facing what needs to be changed. A practical way to deepen this acceptance is to develop a practice of mindful presence during uncomfortable moments. When pain arises, instead of fighting it, acknowledge it with gentle curiosity. Ask yourself what it's revealing about your fears or attachments. Notice where in your body the pain manifests, the clenched jaw, the tight chest, the restless mind, and breathe into those places. Recognize that within every discomfort lies an opportunity, the chance to confront the illusions that keep you stuck and to begin dismantling the barriers to your true self. Growth is never quiet or easy, but it becomes smoother when you stop resisting what is and start moving with it, knowing that true change is worth every bit of the pain it brings. Chapter 10. The Art of Choosing Yourself. Defining self-choice. Every day, we make choices that reflect our identity, often without realizing it. These choices shape our beliefs, our emotions, and ultimately, our paths in life. Imagine waking up in the morning. You decide what clothes to put on, what breakfast to eat, and how to respond to those around you. Each decision, no matter how small, is a thread in the fabric of self-identity. We think of ourselves in certain ways, often influenced by what we imagine others expect of us. In this intricate dance of existence, the mind sometimes tricks us into believing we have fewer options than we do. It is easy to fall into the routine of what seems necessary or expected, losing sight of our authentic selves buried underneath layers of conditioning. At the core of our being lies the quiet war between authenticity and expectation. The inner critic, that nagging voice that feeds our insecurities, often screams the loudest. It tells us to stay comfortable, to fit into the molds created by society, family, and friends. Yet, beneath this pressure is a desire for growth, a yearning to break free from the constraints we may not even recognize we are living under. When we take the time to examine our choices consciously, we start to see the subtle whispers of who we are inside, battling against the loud clamor of who we think we should be. Self-choice is essentially the ability to choose for ourselves, to carve out our identity amid external influences. Choosing yourself is no small feat. It requires a kind of bravery that feels foreign in a world that often pushes conformity. When we make decisions based on deep inner truth rather than external validation, we unlock a deeper layer of spiritual authenticity. This is where true courage comes into play. It is not about the absence of fear, but rather the willingness to act despite the fear. This might mean stepping away from relationships that do not serve us or pursuing a dream that seems distant, perhaps even unattainable. Self-choice can feel like throwing a boulder into a still pond, creating ripples of change that disrupt the tranquility of our familiar patterns. In this space of internal chaos, we must learn to listen. The whispers of our inner selves often get drowned out by noise. Practicing mindfulness can help us cultivate the clarity we need to hear those whispers. When we engage in practices like meditation or journaling, we provide ourselves the opportunity to sift through the debris of external expectations and societal pressures. This process can illuminate our desires, our fears, and ultimately, the choices that align with our true selves. Understanding that the path to self-choice involves discomfort is crucial. Just as a caterpillar must endure the cocoon to become a butterfly, so must we navigate through our internal struggles to emerge as our authentic selves. Trusting the process, having faith in our journey, and understanding that every choice is part of a greater unfolding allows us to embrace the unpredictable nature of life boldly. To truly define self-choice in our lives, we must acknowledge that it's an ongoing process. Every day presents new opportunities to choose differently. The next time you feel yourself swayed by external forces, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what do I genuinely want? Make a conscious effort to reply honestly. Engage in the practice of choosing yourself repeatedly, even when it feels uncomfortable. It is in these moments of choice, filled with uncertainty and fear, that we find our truest strength and identity. Overcoming external influences. From the moment we wake up until we close our eyes at night, the voices of the outside world seep into the quiet corners of our minds. These voices whisper who we should be, what we should want, and how we ought to act. Over time, they build invisible walls inside us, walls made of judgment, expectation, and conditioning, and we begin to mistake these walls for the boundaries of who we really are. The neighbor's approval, the social media personas, the echo chamber of family beliefs. They stitch threads into our identity without our real consent, crafting false versions of ourselves that fit neatly into their mold. We carry these borrowed identities like armor, believing they will protect us from rejection or failure. But this armor is heavy and restrictive. It keeps the silent parts of our true selves locked away, while our inner critic finds fertile ground to grow. The clash between these imposed identities and the flickers of our authentic self creates a war that often goes unnoticed but shapes everything: our choices, our fears, even our dreams. The sense of alienation, the gnawing feeling that we're playing a part, whispers a truth deeper than words. You are not here to live someone else's script. Breaking free from the layers of external influence starts with seeing the noise for what it is: a clutter that clouds your inner voice. This noise is loud, persistent, and often comes wrapped in well-meaning advice or cultural norms you've never questioned. The first act of rebellion is to pause and listen inward, to hear the subtle pulse underneath the chatter. It takes courage to face the discomfort of silence where no one else's expectations are echoing. But that is where your truest self waits, in patient stillness. Once you begin to notice how much of your energy is spent maintaining facades and reacting to external pressures, you can choose differently. The art of choosing yourself is a quiet revolution that demands honesty and tenderness toward the parts tasked with survival: your inner child, your ego, your fears, all of which pushed for safety in disguise. Letting go means embracing your contradictions and the tension between growth and comfort. It means giving yourself permission to say no, even when it shakes your world, and carving space where the narrative belongs only to you. Walking away from external expectations doesn't erase the scars left by them. It means acknowledging that some of those wounds shaped your defense mechanisms, and that healing will feel like violence at times, shattering old patterns, facing trauma loops, and quieting emotional addictions. But through this chaos emerges clarity. When you cultivate awareness that is steady and kind, you reclaim the power to shape your identity on your own terms. This is the battlefield where the quiet war shifts, where transformation becomes less a fight against others and more an intimate journey toward freedom. Notice the moments when you are acting or feeling less like yourself and more like a worn-out mask. In those moments, try to ask, whose voice am I really listening to? The answer might surprise you, but it could be the key to stepping back into your own life. This practice, repeated with softness rather than judgment, builds the courage to resist external pressures and gently restore your connection with your own truth. Living with intention and courage. Every day, beneath our conscious thoughts, a quiet war rages within, between who we are, who we pretend to be, and who we wish to become. These internal conflicts are rarely loud, but they influence every decision we make. Your inner critic, the voice that dismisses your worth or warns you of failure, fights against your desire to grow. The wounded inner child, seeking safety and comfort, pulls you toward familiar patterns, even if those patterns limit your potential. Meanwhile, the ego clings to stories of perfection and control, desperately avoiding vulnerability. These battles aren't obvious. They happen in the background of your mind, shaping your habits, your fears, and your identity without you fully noticing. Understanding these silent struggles isn't about blame or judgment, but about seeing where your internal war lies and how it influences your actions and your inactions. Choosing authenticity is rarely convenient. It often feels like stepping into the unknown, exposing parts of yourself that make you vulnerable. Yet, living with intention demands this courage, that willingness to face discomfort rather than retreat into safe illusions. It means questioning the false stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve. Sometimes this choice feels like a slow, painful shedding of layers, especially when past trauma or fear whispers that peace is safer than truth. The act of aligning your life with your deeper values challenges the ego's need for validation and the inner child's craving for reassurance. But in these moments of discomfort, there is a quiet power. Each deliberate act of honesty chips away at the illusions and reveals a more genuine self. Living intentionally is about waking up to the fact that every choice, no matter how small, is a declaration of who you truly want to be, not who you've been told to pretend to be. When you start paying attention to your internal conflicts, the inner critic's judgment, the fear of failure, the urge to hide, you begin to see your life in a new light. Intentional living isn't about perfection, but about clarity. It's about choosing to stand in your truth despite the pushback from your unconscious fears. This awareness allows you to pause before reacting impulsively, whether it's avoiding confrontation, overworking to silence self-doubt, or numbing emotional pain with distraction. Each time you recognize these patterns and decide differently, you strengthen the muscle of your intention. Over time, these small choices carve out a new way to live, one rooted in authenticity rather than illusions spun to protect you from pain or discomfort. It's about falling in love with your own process of becoming, knowing that every brave step forward rewires the internal war, giving peace a real chance to take hold. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the act of moving forward despite it. When you choose to live intentionally, you enter a space where growth often feels like violence. Letting go of familiar stories and comfortable identities can feel brutal, lonely, even terrifying. Yet, it's in that chaos that transformation takes root. The inner critic might scream louder, the inner child may resist, and the ego might demand retreat. But every time you step into that discomfort, affirming your commitment to truth, you weaken the hold of those internal enemies. Courage isn't about an overwhelming force of bravery. It's about small, consistent acts of daring, saying no to what doesn't serve you, facing difficult truths, or daring to show up genuinely instead of hiding behind a mask. Living courageously means trusting that your true self, scarred, imperfect, and still evolving, is worth every risk that comes with the journey. Choosing yourself is about prioritizing your growth over external approval or fleeting comfort. It's knowing that real change rarely looks graceful. It often involves breaking old patterns, facing internal storms, and saying no to the safe but empty illusions. This decision is made each morning when you wake up and decide to align your actions with what truly matters to you, rather than what's expected or familiar. It requires a steady resolve to live by your own standards, daring to be imperfect, to fail, and to start over as many times as necessary. The process can feel like an internal war, where surrendering to old defenses is tempting, but each moment you choose your truth feeds the courage stored inside. Over time, this relentless act of choosing yourself rewires your internal landscape, transforming fear and doubt into resilience and authenticity. The key is simply to keep showing up, even when it's hard, knowing that this is the true act of living with intention and courage. Chapter 11. The Modern Spiritual Warrior. Merging Spirituality and Psychological Truth. Merging spirituality with psychological truth often reveals the internal struggles we face. These conflicts shape our identities and guide us towards our destinies. At the heart of this integration lies the tension between who we are and who we pretend to be. On one side, there's the spiritual quest for connection, understanding, and peace. On the other, psychological insights expose fears, traumas, and the mechanisms we use to cope. The intersection of these two realms offers profound insights into personal growth as we confront the war between our inner critic and our nurturing inner child. This battleground can seem daunting, but it also presents an invitation for authentic transformation. When we acknowledge our psychological truths, we can approach spiritual wisdom with more honesty. For example, someone seeking peace through meditation may first need to address deep-seated trauma or self-sabotaging beliefs that obstruct their path. Recognizing these barriers requires inner work, often uncomfortable yet essential, to clear the way for genuine healing. This is not just about finding peace, it's about understanding the struggles that lead us to that peace. Merging spiritual wisdom with psychological insights can offer practical approaches to navigating life's conflicts. One simple method is to practice mindfulness, not only as a spiritual exercise, but as a way to observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment. By becoming aware of your inner dialogue, you can identify patterns that represent fear or self-doubt. This awareness is the first step towards transformation, opening the door for real introspection. Engage in self-reflection and prayer or meditation together. While meditation offers clarity, prayer can foster a sense of connection to something greater. Combining both allows you to seek guidance while also encouraging personal responsibility in your journey. It's about asking for support and recognizing your psychological truths rather than escaping them. These practices invite a deeper understanding of your experiences and can lead to remarkable insights about your emotional landscape. The path toward merging these different truths doesn't have to be lonely. Seek community or support groups where you can share your journey. When others contribute their spiritual and psychological battles, it can reduce feelings of isolation and promote shared healing. Connecting with those who are also navigating these intricacies provides comfort and perspective, reminding you that the battle for authenticity is often a shared experience. Every step taken toward integrating these truths enriches your inner life, leading to a more profound sense of purpose. The challenge lies in facing the discomfort that arises when seeking truth while remaining open to spiritual growth. Small, intentional practices can be incredibly effective in fostering this integration, serving as reminders that you are not just fragmented identities, but a whole being on a path of discovery. Consider keeping a journal that captures both your spiritual insights and psychological realizations. Regularly reflecting on this can help you track growth over time, revealing how interconnected these parts of you truly are. This practice encourages a sense of accountability, propelling you toward deeper understanding and transformation. Practicing inner discipline. True strength does not come from denying the shadows within us. Instead, it emerges when we face our darker selves with steady eyes and steady hearts, refusing to turn away even when the truth feels jagged and raw. Inner discipline is not a rigid force aimed at suppression or perfection. It's a quiet, conscious choosing to keep coming back, to show up and sit with whatever stirs beneath the surface. The storms inside are constant: fear, doubt, shame, and those parts we've hidden even from ourselves. But surrendering to discipline means meeting that chaos not with struggle, but with steady presence. It's the difference between being dragged under by your inner currents and learning how to swim in them, knowing that real power lives in consistency rather than momentary bursts of will. What makes this endurance so hard isn't the loud noise of the world, but the whispering doubts inside. The voice that says, "Not today," or "This is too much." Inner discipline surfaces when you decide that each moment of choice matters more than the comfort of avoidance. When you choose to feel without shutting down, to confront your rage, your grief, or that gnawing sense of not being enough, you're weaving a thread of trust with yourself. It's a trust that says you aren't broken beyond repair, and that the fragments of your inner war can be held together by repeated acts of kindness and attention, even when it hurts to look closely. This isn't heroic in a flashy way. It's the humble heroism of showing up and bearing witness to the parts of you that most want to stay silent. Discipline often gets mistaken for a harsh internal drill sergeant barking orders, but the real art lies in choosing presence over escape. It's recognizing that the impulse to flee discomfort has been wired deep into our habits, and rewiring that is slow work. The adult self, the one willing to sit through discomfort, grows not through control, but through awareness. This means when the old patterns arise, when fear of success whispers that you'll fail, or the craving for comfort pulls you back into numbness, you don't push harder or lash out at yourself. Instead, you narrow your attention like a laser, witnessing those urges with curiosity rather than judgment. It's a practice of holding space for the tension without dissolving into it. Building a resilient inner stance requires accepting that growth will look messy and uncertain. It's less about rigid rules and more like tending a garden that doesn't always bloom on schedule. When you practice choosing growth over comfort, you acknowledge the fear without letting it paralyze you. You let the inner child know it's heard and safe, yet you whisper to the adult self that taking the next step is an act of reclamation, not punishment. The war inside is not about conquering, but understanding. Discipline becomes a dance, one step forward through fear, one step back into rest, but never abandoning the effort of showing up for yourself. One way this looks in everyday life is when you catch yourself reaching for distractions the moment anxiety rises. Instead of reflexively scrolling through your phone or binge-watching something to drown out your feelings, practicing inner discipline means inviting that anxiety to sit with you for a few breaths. It's uncomfortable, but each small act of resistance to avoidance rewires the brain ever so slightly, building a reservoir of resilience that makes the next encounter a little easier. Over time, those moments become less about self-control and more about self-choosing. A quiet revolution where you reclaim the narrative from the internal critics and trauma loops that have been running the show far too long. If the weight of your internal battles feels crushing, try anchoring yourself with a simple, steady routine that honors presence. This might mean sitting in silence for 5 minutes each day, journaling your experiences without editing, or easing into physical movement that connects you to your body's wisdom. Discipline practiced in these small, tender ways is not about forcing change, but inviting it, one conscious breath, one steady moment at a time. Cultivating compassion for self and others. Living inside your mind often feels like navigating a storm without a compass. The internal world is layered and contradictory, a battleground where the inner critic hisses loudest when you falter, while the wounded inner child whispers stories of abandonment. It's no wonder that to cultivate compassion, you need to see that these parts of you aren't enemies, but fragments of your humanity. The chaos inside is not a sign of weakness, but an honesty about your complexity. Honoring this complexity requires a delicate acknowledgement. Every scar, every doubt, every glimmer of hope has a place in your story. When the noise of the world intensifies, learning to listen inward becomes an act of rebellion, a way of forging peace amid internal war. It's easy to forget that self-compassion isn't about fixing yourself or pretending everything's okay. It's about showing up with curiosity and genuine kindness, even when you're overwhelmed or falling apart. If you listen closely to the voices inside, your inner critic criticizing, your inner child feeling unseen, you realize they're trying to tell you something vital. The critic fears vulnerability, the child longs for safety, and your adult self must somehow hold space for both. Recognizing this doesn't mean giving all parts equal power, but rather, understanding that suppressing them only deepens the chaos. Compassion is the act of welcoming all parts of yourself, not as errors to erase, but as chapters of your unfolding story. It's a practice of gentle acknowledgement in a world that demands relentless progress, reminding yourself that your worth isn't defined by how quickly you heal, but by your willingness to face what's inside with openness. In a society that celebrates achievement and suppresses vulnerability, cultivating self-compassion becomes an act of defiance. The modern spiritual warrior understands that true strength isn't polished perfection, but the courage to look inward without judgment. This process is rarely graceful. It's messy, uncomfortable, and often feels like breaking before building. Yet, every time you pause to soften toward your own pain, you dismantle another layer of shame. Material scarcity, success, failure, the fear of being seen. All these threads intertwine inside your psyche, creating a web that traps or frees depending on how compassion is woven through it. Recognizing the beauty in your struggles transforms internal chaos into a source of insight, setting the stage for genuine self-understanding and peace. Radical kindness turns the act of self-compassion into an everyday ritual. It's a deliberate choice to treat yourself as you would a dear friend, patient, gentle, forgiving. When shame sneaks in or the inner critic's voice grows loud, this kindness becomes a shield. It's not about ignoring mistakes or pretending you're perfect, but about speaking to yourself with honesty and care. For example, if you lash out at yourself after a mistake, pause and imagine what your best friend would say. Usually, they'd remind you that everyone makes errors and that your worth isn't diminished by slip-ups. This habit of speaking kindly inward creates a foundation that pushes you through emotional storms, transforming conflict into compassion. Over time, this internal warmth radiates outward, influencing how you relate to others and how deeply you can genuinely connect beyond surface appearances. Extending compassion outward involves noticing others' pain without immediate judgment or solutions. It's about sitting beside someone in their suffering, recognizing shared vulnerability rather than fixing or dismissing it. In a world that often values productivity over presence, genuine connection can feel revolutionary. When you approach others with kindness, you build bridges where walls once stood. Recognizing that everyone is fighting their own silent war reminds us that healing isn't a solo journey, but a collective act. Small gestures, listening without fixing, offering a kind word, showing patience, become acts of rebellion against the coldness of modern life. These acts ripple outward, transforming communities and fostering spaces where vulnerability can be safe and real healing can happen. Practicing radical kindness also means forgiving those who have hurt you, recognizing that they, too, are fighting battles invisible to others. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but frees you from its grip, allowing compassion to flow both inward and outward. When you learn to forgive, you are intentionally choosing love over resentment. This doesn't happen overnight, but through consistent practice. Each moment you choose kindness, even when it's hard, you strengthen your internal resilience. This inner resilience becomes the well from which compassion flows freely, an endless source that nourishes not only your soul, but also the lives of those around you. The quieter the wars inside you, the more space there is for authentic connections rooted in understanding and shared humanity. Remember that practicing kindness is a skill that deepens with use. Start small. Offer yourself grace in moments of failure. Extend understanding to the imperfect parts of others. Over time, these acts become second nature, softening the edges of internal conflict while expanding your capacity for love. In this way, compassion becomes your secret weapon, not an act of weakness, but a declaration of pure strength, something that not only heals wounds, but also creates the space for genuine transformation. When kindness becomes your default, you stand a little taller in the chaos, knowing that softness and strength aren't mutually exclusive. They are the same precious thread woven into the fabric of your being. Chapter 12. Practical Wisdom for Inner Battles. Daily Mindfulness Practices. Daily mindfulness practices serve as a powerful form of resistance against the tumult that often resides within us. In a world that relentlessly pushes us towards distraction, taking moments to center ourselves is an act of courage. The inner critic whirls with doubt and negativity, while the inner child reminds us of simpler, more joyful times. Embracing mindfulness means choosing to silence that inner chaos, if only briefly, and tuning into the present moment. This practice isn't just about calming the mind. It's about safeguarding our personal space from the storms that rage around us. When we choose to be mindful, we assert that we can find peace amidst chaos. Each breath we take becomes a small act of defiance against the frenetic pace of modern life. Mindfulness encourages us to engage with our feelings, turning inwards rather than getting lost in external validation. Setting aside a few minutes each day can offer profound benefits. Begin with just 5 minutes of focused breathing. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. Notice how it flows in and out. If thoughts interrupt your focus, acknowledge them without judgment, and gently bring your attention back to your breath. This practice is about acceptance, not perfection. Over time, you might find that this simple act grounds you throughout your day. Incorporating mindfulness into daily activities can also be revolutionary. Whether you're washing dishes, walking, or even enjoying your morning coffee. Devote your full attention to the experience. Feel the warmth of the mug, the texture of the dish soap on your hands, or the rhythm of your feet touching the ground. These miniature moments of awareness can add up, transforming mundane tasks into opportunities for connection with the self. Journaling is another meaningful tool for mindfulness. Set aside a few moments each day to write down your thoughts and feelings. This practice not only helps clarify confusion, but also allows you to observe patterns in your thinking and emotional responses. You might discover themes of trauma loops or emotional addictions that you wish to break. Writing becomes a mirror, showing you areas where you may need healing and growth. As you cultivate these daily practices, remember that mindfulness is a journey, not a destination. It is about becoming aware of your internal landscape, celebrating small victories along the way. Track your progress and be gentle with yourself. Embrace mistakes as they arise. They are part of the experience. As time passes, you may notice subtle shifts, like moving from feeling anxious to experiencing moments of serene clarity. These shifts indicate that you are learning to honor both the chaos and calm within you, embracing your whole self. To deepen your practice further, consider engaging in mindful meditation or guided imagery sessions. There are numerous apps that can guide you through these experiences, offering structured approaches to cultivating stillness. Choose one that resonates with you, and let it become a regular companion on your journey. The more you invest in this quiet rebellion, the more equipped you will be to face the inevitable challenges of life. Each mindful moment creates ripples, impacting not just how you experience the present, but transforming how you navigate your future. Start small, stay curious, and be patient with yourself. The act of choosing mindfulness is in itself a choice to embrace life's complexities with an open heart. Building emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is often mistaken for mere toughness, but it is much more subtle and profound than that. It is the delicate yet unwavering structure inside us that holds together when storms rage, those storms we rarely voice. Beneath the surface of emotional resilience lies a complex web of acceptance, awareness, and compassion toward the fragments of ourselves we usually reject. The inner critic's barbs, the wounded inner child's pleas, and the ego's desperate armor. At its core, emotional resilience is this honest acknowledgement of internal warfare without flinching or turning away. To build resilience, we must first grasp how our minds fight this quiet war every day. It's not about silencing pain or pushing down shadowy thoughts. It is about noticing these inner voices without judgment. Emotional resilience asks us to meet these conflicts face to face with a blend of relentless honesty and gentle compassion. This means recognizing the parts of us that resist growth or fear success, the loops of trauma repeating like ghosts in the background, and the addiction to emotional chaos that keeps us stuck. Rather than pretending these battles don't exist, resilience is the steady ground beneath both suffering and hope, holding space for all the contradictions weaving our internal reality. This architecture isn't built from disregard or denial of struggle. It rises from welcoming discomfort as a teacher. When we stop seeing vulnerability as weakness and reframe our inner conflicts as signposts rather than failures, we create a foundation from which real healing can begin. The parts of us that long for peace but fear its stillness, or crave growth yet cling to safety, are not enemies but pieces of a whole self learning to reconcile. Emotional resilience is the silent strength that allows these pieces to live together without tearing one another apart, revealing a landscape where transformation, though often violent and painful, becomes not destruction but rebirth. The first step in building emotional resilience is learning to embrace pain rather than shrink from it. Mindfulness offers a doorway, bringing attention to the present moment in a way that doesn't fight what arises inside us. When the inner critic rages or the old trauma thaws, instead of distracting or numbing, we lean into the sensations with soft curiosity. Naming what we feel, anger, shame, fear, without pushing for an immediate fix begins to loosen the grip of emotional addiction and reactivity. This mindful bearing of pain is not passive surrender, but an active choice to witness ourselves honestly. Acceptance is not a resignation to suffering. It is an intentional stance that refuses to add another layer of judgment or resistance. By accepting uncomfortable emotions as part of our internal landscape, we stop adding fuel to the fire of self-criticism. This acceptance creates room for the inner critic and inner child to coexist, illuminating the truth behind their messages. Sometimes the inner child's cry for safety or the ego's desperate clutching at image reveals wounds that have been ignored for years. Meeting these with kindness disrupts trauma loops and begins the slow dismantling of false identities that no longer serve us. Intentionality is the commitment we bring to this often messy work. It is choosing ourselves repeatedly, deciding to confront fears of success or peace, even when it feels like betrayal to the familiar struggle. Building resilience demands courage, the courage to sit in discomfort without fleeing, to face the parts of ourselves we usually hide, and to trust that transformation, as brutal as it can be, is ultimately a form of healing. The process isn't about avoiding emotional violence, but about making peace with it, understanding that the fiercest battles often forge the strongest armor. In this way, emotional resilience becomes not an escape from pain, but a way to use that pain as a tool for greater freedom and depth of being. Creating a supportive inner environment. Building a space inside yourself where honesty, vulnerability, and kindness can grow is not about perfection. It's about creating room for what's real. Often, internal chaos arises from conflicting voices, the harsh critic blaming, the wounded inner child pleading for understanding, and the adult self trying to find balance among these echoes. To shape a supportive inner environment, you first need awareness. Notice how these parts show up, what they say, how they feel, where they resist or cling. When you start observing without judgment, you begin to loosen the grip of shame or avoidance, making space for truth to breathe. It's in these quiet moments of noticing that transformation begins. When you acknowledge the mess without trying to fix it immediately, you set the stage for honesty to flourish. Creating this environment means intentionally turning toward your inner world with kindness, even when it's uncomfortable. Stop weaponizing your self-criticism as a motivator and instead see it as an alarm, telling you where healing is needed. Be willing to feel the vulnerability beneath your defenses, understanding that concealment and suppression only deepen the inner war. Developing self-compassion is like gentle reinforcement, consistently speaking to yourself as you would to a wounded friend. When you include forgiveness and patience, your inner space becomes less hostile and more welcoming. Over time, small acts like journaling, mindfulness, or simply pausing to acknowledge your feelings can shift internal terrain from conflict to cooperation. As you cultivate awareness and kindness, you also build boundaries within yourself, clearer distinctions between the inner critic and the voice of compassion, the wounded child and the wise adult. This isn't about silencing parts or pretending they don't exist, but about giving each part a safe place to speak without domination or shame. Sometimes, naming these parts can help. Label the critic, the scared child, the tired adult, and imagine how each might be longing for recognition. When you listen deeply, you begin to understand that these conflicting voices are trying to protect you in their own ways. By holding space for them, rather than fighting them, you create a support system inside that can handle discomfort without collapsing under it. Practicing mindfulness alongside self-awareness anchors you in the present, so you're less likely to get pulled into endless loops of fear, shame, or self-rejection. It's about noticing the internal noise and consciously choosing to step outside of it moment by moment. This shift from reactive to intentional awareness rewires your inner environment, making it less a battleground and more a sanctuary. Imagine your inner world as a garden. Some weeds will sprout, and some flowers will bloom. Your job isn't to eradicate every weed, but to tend the garden with patience, removing what doesn't serve growth and nourishing what does. Over time, your inner space becomes a refuge where even pain and chaos are acknowledged as part of the whole, not enemies to be defeated, but parts of a living, evolving universe inside you. One practical way to nurture this environment is to develop a daily practice of gentle check-ins. Ask yourself simple questions. What am I feeling right now? What do I need? What thoughts are pushing or pulling me? Writing down these reflections creates a tangible map of your inner landscape. When you recognize patterns, such as recurring shame or fear, you can slowly untangle their roots and respond differently. Remember, healing doesn't happen from a place of harsh judgment, but from patience and curiosity. The more you care for your inner world, the more resilient you become, able to hold difficult truths and still remain rooted in love rather than chaos. Conclusion: embracing the quiet war within. Recognizing your inner battles. It's easy to overlook these inner conflicts. They're often masked by external distractions or the noise of everyday responsibilities. Yet, if you pause and take a breath, you can begin to hear the whispers of your inner critic, the echoes of past traumas, and the pull of unfulfilled aspirations. These are the emotional and psychological struggles that shape your decisions and influence your identity, often without your conscious awareness. The first step in acknowledging these battles is cultivating a habit of self-reflection. Set aside moments each day to sit in silence, to feel your emotions fully without judgment, and to notice the patterns of thought that arise. You might discover a nagging voice that criticizes your every move or that old wound that refuses to heal. By recognizing these elements as part of your inner landscape, you start to disarm their power. When you confront your fears of success or the discomfort that comes with growth, you give yourself permission to explore the deeper layers of your psyche. This could mean acknowledging the ego's need for validation or the inner child's yearnings for safety and acceptance. Consider how often you find yourself in emotional loops, repeating patterns that stem from past experiences. These loops can feel familiar and strangely comforting, yet they can also keep you stagnant. By facing these uncomfortable truths head-on, you begin to break the cycle and create space for new possibilities. Journaling can be a powerful tool in this process. Writing down your thoughts and emotions allows you to externalize and examine them more clearly. It's an invitation to explore who you are beneath the layers of societal expectations and self-imposed limitations. Ultimately, recognizing your inner battles is about embracing complexity. It's not a linear path, but a winding journey filled with moments of discomfort and clarity. Each realization nudges you closer to your authentic self, shaping your identity and influencing your destiny. You might find that understanding the war within leads to greater compassion for yourself and others. By accepting your own struggles, you allow for a more profound connection with those around you, fostering an environment where transformation isn't seen as violence, but as a natural progression of growth. To support this journey, practice mindfulness, allow yourself to feel, and remember that every struggle is a step toward your truth. With patience and persistence, these inner battles can unfold as lessons that empower you to choose yourself, leading to a life aligned with your true desires. The power of conscious choice. Conscious choice is the quiet revolution inside us, the rare moment when we stop reacting and start deciding. It's more than making a decision. It's reclaiming control over the unseen battles raging beneath the surface, the battles between our inner critic and inner child, between comfort and growth, between ego and truth. When you recognize the power in consciously choosing your response rather than letting your past trauma or fear hijack your actions, you begin to peel away layers of false identity. This is where you find your authentic self, not the one shaped by pain, expectations, or survival, but the one that exists beyond those shadows. Recognizing this power means breaking free from destructive cycles that have silently dictated your behavior, your relationships, even your self-worth. Choosing consciously is the bridge between survival and creation. The internal war has roared for so long that many don't even notice it anymore. It hums behind every self-doubt, every relapse into old patterns, every moment of hiding behind masks that no longer protect but imprison. But when you pause and choose, really choose, with awareness, you begin to dismantle those invisible chains. This isn't just about willpower or forcing change. It's about honoring the full complexity within you, including your fears, wounds, and desires, and then deciding to move in a direction guided by your truest values and deepest knowing. This moment of recognition, that your life depends on the choices you make within, feels like stepping out of a thick fog into clear sunlight. It's the moment when the battles inside lose their power simply because you are no longer a passive battleground, but an active participant in your own story. But embracing conscious choice requires more than insight. It demands courage, the kind of courage that presses into discomfort rather than avoiding it. It's not comfortable to face the parts of yourself that scream for safety by clinging to familiar pain, or to feel the sting of old fears threatening to undo your progress. Yet, courage is what allows you to see those fears for what they really are, echoes from the past, not the rules of today. It's the courage to say no to the ghosts that haunt your peace, and yes to the uncertain terrain of growth. This kind of bravery turns chaos into clarity because it rejects the lie that your internal chaos must define you. Every time you choose yourself, you carve out space where your truth can breathe. This act of choosing transforms the noise of internal conflict into a steady pulse of purpose. It means stepping away from the safety of pretending and standing firmly in the vulnerability of authenticity. This path is never painless. It involves dismantling the stories you've told yourself to survive, releasing emotional addictions, and facing the fear of success and peace as much as the fear of failure. But it's also the only path that leads to true freedom, where healing is not a destination but an ongoing practice of selecting what aligns with your growth over what merely soothes temporary discomfort. Through conscious choice, the battle between who you are and who you pretend to be can find resolution, and you can begin to live in alignment with your deepest self, not the self shaped by trauma or ego, but the self emerging from truth and intention. When trapped in internal conflict, one practical step is to develop a moment-to-moment practice of noticing where your attention goes. Are you falling into old stories? Are you retreating into the voice of your inner critic or succumbing to the seduction of emotional avoidance? Pause, even if for a breath or two, and ask yourself, what choice can I make right now that serves my growth rather than my fear? This simple act of pausing to choose reframes your relationship with internal chaos, making it less a battlefield and more a terrain where conscious decisions forge a new path forward. Transforming conflict into growth. Internal conflict often feels like a relentless battle, tearing us between what we want to hide and what we know is true. It's the silent war between our inner critic's relentless judgments and the quiet voice of compassion waiting to break through. This tension can leave us feeling stuck, insignificant, or overwhelmed, but it also carries the seeds of change. When we stop fighting ourselves and instead begin to observe these conflicts with curiosity, we begin to see their true purpose. They push us toward growth. Internal conflict signals that life is nudging us to confront old stories, hidden fears, and unspoken desires. It's a mirror held up by our subconscious, revealing where our wounds live and where strength can be cultivated. Recognizing this subtle power turns conflict from a source of pain into a portal for awakening. Often, we see conflict as a clash that needs resolution, but in truth, it's a space for integration. Our inner world is rarely black and white. It's a complex web of contradictions, our past self fighting the emerging adult, comfort battling growth, ego opposing our authentic self. Instead of suppressing these opposing voices, we can learn to listen intently, understanding that each side has a story worth uncovering. When we do this, we begin to see conflict as a dialogue, not a war. It allows us to move from binary thinking, good versus evil, right versus wrong, to embracing the messiness of being human. This shift transforms internal turmoil into an ongoing conversation that refines who we are, revealing new layers of ourselves that were once hidden behind fear or shame. Transforming conflict into growth requires a delicate dance between surrender and action. It starts with consciously choosing to surrender the need to control every thought or emotion that arises. Instead of resisting our internal storms, we lean into them, inviting whatever is there into our awareness. Surrendering doesn't mean resignation. It's an act of courage, a willingness to be present with what is rather than what we wish it to be. This openness creates space for clarity to emerge from chaos, enabling us to see what our conflict is really about. At the same time, active engagement is necessary. It's about showing up fully for ourselves in the moment, asking what lesson this inner war is offering. By turning our attention inward and observing without judgment, we begin to notice patterns, triggers, and underlying beliefs fueling our struggles. Practicing this art involves patience, an awareness that change is slow and nonlinear. When driven by the desire to heal, we can gently confront the parts of ourselves we usually hide, from the inner critic to the wounded inner child, bringing them into the light rather than letting them dictate our choices from the shadows. Each internal battle, once approached with curiosity and kindness, becomes an opportunity to deepen our understanding. Making space for discomfort allows transformation to happen not through violence or rejection, but through compassionate acceptance. Sometimes, this means making peace with our fears or doubts, knowing they no longer need to define us. Over time, this practice rewires our relationship with conflict. It becomes a fertile ground for rebirth rather than an endless struggle. Sometimes, transformation feels like a kind of quiet violence, rupture necessary to break free from old identities or patterns. But that violence is not destructive, it's creative. It forces us to shed layers of false selves and step into versions of ourselves aligned with truth. The art is in choosing ourselves amidst the chaos, to embrace the discomfort as part of the process, trusting that through the rupture, something new can emerge. Conscious surrender paired with active engagement helps us to navigate this delicate terrain, turning internal conflicts into gateways rather than barriers. Each internal battle is a signpost, guiding us toward authenticity if we are willing to listen and respond with integrity, patience, and a gentle kind of strength. When we learn to dance with our inner conflicts instead of fighting them, they become the very tools that carve out our best, most genuine self. Appendices. Additional resources for inner work. We all carry battles within us, often hidden from the outside world, yet they shape how we navigate life. These inner conflicts, between our desires and fears, our past traumas and future hopes, create a landscape where our identity forms and reforms. Every unspoken thought and suppressed emotion can feel like a silent war, steering us in one direction while our hearts yearn for another. When we examine this internal chaos, it's crucial to acknowledge that our self-perception, relationships, and life choices are all influenced by these battles. A person's worth can be obscured by critical voices that echo from childhood, creating an internal struggle that can last for years. Understanding how these influences operate is the first step toward achieving a more authentic self, allowing us to leap boldly into the world equipped with a clearer understanding of who we are. The confrontation may feel daunting, but clarity often emerges from the chaos. Each journey through personal conflict begins with vulnerability. It requires us to show our wounds, share our fears, and acknowledge our limitations without judgment. This exposure is not a weakness. It is a courageous act that fosters connection with our authentic selves and those around us. To cultivate inner honesty, we can practice active self-reflection, journaling about our emotions, or seeking therapy to unpack our thoughts. This process allows the truth to surface, letting us assess our choices and tendencies with compassion. Movement toward conscious transformation involves intentional actions that align with our inner truths. In moments of emotional chaos, We can use techniques like mindfulness or meditation to center ourselves. Breathing deeply and simply observing our thoughts helps reduce the noise, opening the door to clarity and insight. As we engage with these pathways, we cultivate the skills necessary to withstand the storms of our inner battles, allowing us to emerge stronger and more aligned with who we genuinely are. The journey to understanding oneself is unique for everyone, but there are countless resources available to aid you along the way. Books, podcasts, and online courses can serve as companions on this path. Seek out materials that resonate with your struggle. They may highlight the voices of those who have walked similar roads. Support groups offer a space to share experiences and receive encouragement, reminding us that we are not alone in our battles. Finding a mentor, someone who embodies the qualities you aspire to, is invaluable. Through their guidance, you may discover perspectives you hadn't considered and tools you didn't know existed. Remember, each step you take in this inner work is a form of revolution against the quiet war within. As you navigate this battlefield, keep a journal to note your progress, insights, and emotions. This can serve as a tangible reminder of your growth and resilience over time, providing hope and motivation to continue the fight for your true self. Guided meditation scripts. Begin by settling into a comfortable position, allowing your body to feel supported and grounded. Close your eyes gently and take a deep breath, bringing your attention inward. Notice the spaces between your thoughts, those fleeting moments where your mind feels still. In this quiet, you can start to meet the storms inside you without judgment or resistance. Instead of pushing away what feels difficult or uncomfortable, invite curiosity and kindness toward these inner battles, the clashing voices, the pull of fear, the nagging doubts. Imagine watching these conflicts as if from a distance, like waves on the ocean's surface, neither trying to stop them nor getting swept away. Your role here is witness, compassionate, and unafraid. Allow your awareness to settle on one tension or contradiction that feels most present right now. The voice of the inner critic challenging your worth, the tug between your past wounds and your adult self's desire for healing. Notice where this conflict registers in your body, a tightness in your chest, a churning in your stomach, a heaviness in your shoulders. Breathe directly into that place, as if your breath can soften the hold these tensions have on you. Remind yourself that feeling conflicted is part of being alive. It doesn't define you, but it does ask for your attention. Through this observation without judgment, you rip away some of the shame and isolation that secret battles bring. You create a safe space where your internal struggle can be seen clearly and met with honesty. There is a quiet power in surrendering, not giving up, but letting go of the fight against yourself. Start by acknowledging where you have been holding tension against parts of your experience, those hidden corners of your psyche where pain, fear, or shame linger. With every out-breath, envision releasing the need to resist what is. You don't have to fix or change anything right now. Just allow your inner truth to rise up, raw and real, without the edits or defenses. Speak to yourself with tenderness, saying, "I see you. I am here with everything you are." This act of acceptance is an act of love, and it plants seeds of courage deep inside. Facing your silent wars, the fears of success, the avoidance of peace, the pull between growth and comfort, requires a heart willing to hold discomfort without fleeing. Imagine your courage as a soft flame that flickers in the dark, never too big to burn, never too small to be seen. When doubt or fear come to visit, let them sit beside that flame without snuffing it out. Breathe into the tension of not knowing and not being perfect, allowing your inner voice to remind you of your strength in vulnerability. Embracing your truth means sitting with uncertainty and pain, recognizing them as part of your path rather than enemies to conquer. With practice, the inner war quiets enough to reveal a deeper peace that has always been waiting behind your resistance. To begin this practice, you might create a simple ritual, perhaps lighting a candle each time you sit with these meditations, or journaling after each session to honor what arises. The courage to face yourself is not a single heroic act, but a patient dance, returning again and again to the field where your battles play out quietly. Each moment of presence is a victory over the noise and the masks. You're witnessing your tenderness, your refusal to turn away. These are the tools that will transform your inner war into a path of self-discovery and healing. Recommended reading list. When it comes to the silent battles within, the whispers of doubt, the echo of past traumas, the tug-of-war between who we are and who we pretend to be, there's a carousel of books that can serve as guides through the darkness. These books don't offer quick fixes. Instead, they shine a light on the complex layers of your mind, helping you see what's hidden, what's buried, and what's simply waiting to be acknowledged. One foundational read is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. It exposes the internal resistance that keeps us from creating, from changing, from becoming. It reminds you that these conflicts are part of the process, that the fight itself is proof you're on the right path. Pair it with The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, which offers a poetic yet practical way to observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment, helping you detach from the constant noise of your inner critic and ego. For a dive into the roots of internal trauma and the loops we get caught in, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk remains essential. It shows how unresolved trauma manifests in body and mind, urging honesty with yourself about what you've hidden away. To understand the false comfort of our ego and the fear of truly changing, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown is a tender reminder that vulnerability, not perfection, is the true strength. If your internal wars feel like battles between the false self and the true self, often disguised as successes or failures, then The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle offers insight into living fully present, dissolving the illusions that keep you imprisoned. It pushes you to see the difference between pretending to be okay and actual peace that comes from genuine acceptance. For practical wisdom on the art of choosing yourself amid these conflicts, The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander and Rosamund Stone Zander opens a door to seeing life's challenges as opportunities for transformation, not threats to be avoided. Some other titles worth having on your shelf include Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, which teaches that embracing your imperfections is essential to healing, and Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a testament to resilience amid suffering. These books remind us that the war within is universal, and that thorough honesty, patience, and compassion are your most reliable allies. Incorporate their lessons into your daily practice. Write openly about your inner conflicts, listen to their truths, and let them guide you beyond mere avoidance and superficial peace toward genuine growth. Remember, the most potent transformation often begins with a single book or a single chapter you decide to revisit. Pick titles that challenge your current beliefs, stretch your comfort zones, and invite you to see your internal conflicts not as enemies, but as teachers on your journey to wholeness. Keep these books close, revisit their wisdom often, and let their stories fuel your ongoing fight, the quiet war within. If you've reached this final page, something has already shifted inside you. Not a grand transformation, not a Hollywood moment. Something smaller, but more honest. A recognition, a whisper, a quiet knowing that wasn't there before. You've walked through your inner landscapes, the shadows, the storms, the wounds, the illusions. You've met the parts of yourself that you once avoided, the fears you dressed up as logic, the pain you disguised as personality. And you did it without applause, without fireworks, without anyone congratulating you. That alone makes you a warrior. But here's the truth most books don't dare to say. The quiet war doesn't end. Not completely. You don't fix yourself. You don't arrive at a perfect version of you. You don't graduate from being human. Instead, you learn a new rhythm. You learn how to fight with awareness instead of panic. How to navigate storms without losing yourself. How to meet your shadows with compassion instead of fear. You learn to choose yourself again and again. even when the world pulls you in every direction but inward. The goal is not peace without conflict. The goal is peace within conflict. Peace during the battle. Peace as you walk through fire without forgetting your own name. If there is one message this book leaves you with, let it be this. You are not weak for struggling. You are not broken for hurting. And you are not alone in the battles no one sees. Every person you pass has their own quiet war. But you, now, are armed with awareness, compassion, and choice. You've learned how to listen to yourself, how to honor what hurts, how to move forward without abandoning the person looking back at you in the mirror. So go. Live with courage. Live with intention. Live with the understanding that your inner world is not your enemy. It's your map, your teacher, your oldest companion. The quiet war continues. But now, you fight differently. You fight with wisdom. You fight with truth. You fight with love. And that changes everything.